Force yourself to take action and never procrastinate again. Introduction. What if everything you've been told about taking action is wrong? Let me tell you about Alex, a brilliant software developer who spent 5 years of his life trapped in a cycle of endless planning and zero execution. His apartment walls were covered with post-it notes filled with app ideas. His computer contained dozens of half-started projects. Every morning, he'd wake up convinced that today would be different. Today would be the day he'd finally start building his dream project. But each day followed the same pattern: checking emails, scrolling through tech news, watching just one more YouTube tutorial, waiting for that perfect moment when motivation would strike. He had the skills. He had the ideas. What he lacked, he thought, was motivation. Until one rainy Tuesday evening in Seattle changed everything. Sitting in his favorite coffee shop, Alex overheard a conversation that would transform his understanding of action forever. A seasoned entrepreneur was mentoring a young startup founder, and what he said hit Alex like a bolt of lightning. The biggest lie in productivity is that you need to feel ready to start. The most successful people in the world don't wait to feel motivated. They act first, and motivation follows. That simple insight sparked a revolution in Alex's approach. Within 24 hours, he had written the first lines of code for what would become a $50 million startup. Not because he suddenly felt more motivated, but because he finally understood that motivation was never the answer. This transformation mirrors the journey of Will Smith, whose early career was nearly derailed by what he calls tomorrow syndrome. In his autobiography, he shares a profound truth that resonates with anyone who's ever struggled with procrastination. I was the king of putting things off, making excuses. But the day I realized that tomorrow is a lie we tell ourselves was the day my life changed forever. Smith developed what he called his decisive action protocol, a system that didn't rely on feeling ready or waiting for the perfect moment. Instead, it was built on the understanding that action precedes motivation, not the other way around. This same principle would later help him become one of Hollywood's most reliable and productive stars. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Everything you've been taught about productivity and taking action is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how your brain works. We've been sold a fairy tale that goes something like this. First, you get motivated, then you take action, and finally you achieve results. But this sequence is exactly backward. The latest neuroscience research reveals something fascinating. The brain's motivation centers actually activate more strongly after we start moving toward a goal, not before. Think about that for a moment. It means that waiting to feel motivated is like waiting for a car to start moving before you turn the key in the ignition. This book isn't just another collection of productivity tips or time management strategies. What you hold in your hands is a complete rewiring of your relationship with action itself. Through these pages, you'll discover why your brain's resistance to action is actually a sophisticated survival mechanism that can be redirected for success. How high achievers bypass the motivation trap entirely using neurological action triggers. The science-backed method for turning immediate action into your default state. You'll learn why successful people seem to have unlimited motivation, not because they're different from you, but because they've discovered what you're about to learn. That action itself is the key that unlocks motivation, not the other way around. This isn't theory or wishful thinking. The principles in this book are backed by cutting-edge research in behavioral psychology and neuroscience. More importantly, they've been battle-tested by thousands of former procrastinators who have transformed into unstoppable action takers. By listening to this audiobook, you've already proven you're ready for transformation. You've taken the first step, not by waiting for motivation, but by taking action. That's significant. It shows you understand, perhaps instinctively, that change begins with movement. Your journey to becoming an action-oriented powerhouse begins now. Chapter 1. The Greatest Lie About Taking Action. Michael sat at his pristine desk on Sunday evening, surrounded by color-coded sticky notes and his favorite planning tools. The soft glow of his desk lamp illuminated his meticulously crafted weekly schedule, a masterpiece of productivity planning that had taken him 3 hours to perfect. Every task was assigned its perfect time slot, every goal broken down into manageable chunks. His heart swelled with anticipation as he imagined the productive week ahead. "This time it's different," he whispered to himself, admiring how each hour was optimized for maximum efficiency. The planning high coursed through his veins, that intoxicating feeling of having everything figured out, of being totally ready to crush the week ahead. He'd even scheduled his breaks and included buffer time for unexpected challenges. This wasn't just another Monday to Friday plan. This was his ticket to finally building that side project he'd been dreaming about for months. Monday morning started strong. He woke up early, made his scheduled healthy breakfast, and opened his laptop exactly at 7 a.m. By 10 a.m., he'd cleared his work emails and was ready to dive into his passion project during his designated innovation hour. But as the cursor blinked on his screen, something familiar started to happen. A slight heaviness crept into his chest. "Maybe I should check Twitter first, just for a quick break," he thought. "I'll start coding after lunch when I'm more focused." Lunch came and went. The perfectly planned schedule began to blur. By 4 p.m., he was deep in a YouTube rabbit hole about productivity systems, planning yet another perfect approach for tomorrow. This cycle might sound painfully familiar. It's the same pattern that keeps millions of capable people stuck in an endless loop of planning without execution. But here's what makes this pattern so insidious. It feels like the right approach. After all, isn't proper planning the key to success? Don't we need to feel motivated before we can take meaningful action? This is where we encounter the greatest lie ever told about taking action: the belief that motivation must come first. Think of the prevailing wisdom about productivity and achievement. We're told to find our passion, get motivated, and then take action. This sequence seems logical, even obvious. It's why we buy motivational books, watch inspiring videos, and create elaborate plans. We're waiting for that surge of motivation to propel us into action. But this approach has it completely backward, and no one understands this better than Mel Robbins. In 2008, Robbins found herself at rock bottom, facing bankruptcy, struggling with depression, and unable to even get out of bed in the morning. Like many of us, she kept waiting for motivation to strike, for that magical moment when she'd finally feel ready to turn her life around. "I was the queen of hitting the snooze button," Robbins recalls. "Every night, I'd go to bed promising myself that tomorrow would be different. I'd feel motivated in the evening, planning all the things I'd do differently. But when morning came, that motivation was nowhere to be found." Her breakthrough came from an unexpected realization. Motivation itself was the problem. "Motivation is garbage," she famously declared in her TEDx talk. "It's never there when you need it most." This stark insight led her to develop the 5-second rule, not as a motivational tool, but as a way to bypass the need for motivation entirely. Robbins discovered what neuroscience now confirms. The brain's motivation centers activate more strongly after we begin moving toward a goal, not before. She started taking action in 5-second windows, not waiting to feel ready or motivated. The results were transformative. Within a few years, she went from bankruptcy to becoming one of the most successful motivational speakers in the world, with her books reaching millions of readers. The science behind this phenomenon is fascinating. Research shows that the brain's reward circuits, the same ones responsible for motivation, light up more intensely after we take action. It's similar to how a car's engine warms up after you start driving, not while it's sitting in the garage. This brings us to the Action First Protocol, a systematic approach to breaking free from the motivation trap. Instead of waiting to feel ready, you start with tiny, almost insignificant actions that require zero motivation to complete. Elena, a freelance graphic designer and mother of 2, discovered this principle by accident during her struggle to balance work and family life. Working from home, she found herself constantly waiting for the right moment to start her projects. often leading to late-night panic sessions to meet deadlines. I used to think I needed at least a 2-hour block of uninterrupted time to do any meaningful work, she explains. I'd wait all day for that perfect moment when the kids were occupied, the house was quiet, and I felt creative. But that moment rarely came. Her transformation began when she started what she called micro moves, tiny work segments that required no motivation whatsoever. Instead of waiting to feel inspired, she would open her design software and work on one small element of a project, even if just for 3 minutes between other tasks. The first day, I just changed the color of a logo while waiting for my coffee to brew, she recalls. It felt almost too small to matter, but something interesting happened. That tiny action often led to another, then another. Some of my best work now happens in these small, unmotivated moments. Elena's experience perfectly illustrates the action-first protocol in practice. She discovered that motivation follows action, not the other way around. By taking small, motivation-free steps, she consistently completed projects ahead of schedule and found herself genuinely excited about work for the first time in years. The protocol works because it acknowledges a fundamental truth about human psychology. The hardest part of any action is starting. Once you begin moving, momentum takes over. It's like pushing a car. The initial push requires the most effort, but once the car is rolling, maintaining its movement becomes much easier. Now it's time for you to experience this shift firsthand with the 5-minute action sprint. Choose one task you've been postponing, something you've been waiting to feel motivated enough to tackle. It could be sending that important email, starting that presentation, or making that phone call you've been avoiding. Don't plan. Don't prepare. Don't wait to feel ready. Instead, commit to working on it for just 5 minutes. Not tomorrow, not later today. Right now, the moment you finish reading this sentence. This isn't about completing the task. It's about proving to yourself that action can precede motivation. Those 5 minutes might not seem like much, but they contain the power to shatter the greatest lie you've been told about taking action. Remember, motion before motivation, action before inspiration, starting before feeling ready. Your 5 minutes begin now. Chapter 2. Why Your Brain Loves to Procrastinate. James stared at his phone in disbelief, checking the time again. 2:47 a.m. His anatomy textbook lay open beside him, barely touched despite his 12-hour study session. Tomorrow's exam loomed just hours away, and yet here he was, having spent another day alternating between social media, random YouTube videos, and waves of self-loathing. "I don't get it," he muttered, running his hands through his disheveled hair. "I love medicine. I've dreamed of being a doctor since I was 10. Why can't I just sit down and study?" His desk was a testament to good intentions, carefully organized notes, color-coded highlighters, and a detailed study schedule he'd created weeks ago. But despite his genuine passion for medicine and crystal-clear career goals, he kept finding himself in this same painful situation. The most frustrating part? He knew the material was interesting. Whenever he actually managed to focus on his studies, he found himself fascinated by the intricate workings of the human body. Yet something kept holding him back, an invisible force that seemed to grow stronger the more important the task became. James's struggle reveals a paradox that haunts millions. Why do we procrastinate on things we genuinely care about? The answer lies not in a lack of discipline or commitment, but in the fascinating way our brains evolved to keep us alive, and how those same survival mechanisms can work against us in the modern world. To understand this phenomenon, we need to journey back roughly 200,000 years, when our ancestors faced daily threats to their survival. The human brain evolved during this period with one primary directive: keep us alive until tomorrow. This meant developing a sophisticated threat detection system that would immediately respond to potential dangers. Here's where things get interesting. Your brain hasn't received any significant hardware updates since those prehistoric times. It's still running on that ancient operating system, but now it's trying to navigate a world of deadlines, projects, and long-term goals, concepts our ancestors never had to consider. When you face a challenging task, your brain performs a threat assessment using the same circuits that once evaluated whether a rustle in the grass might be a predator. The anxiety you feel about starting a difficult project triggers the same neural pathways that once helped your ancestors decide whether to fight a saber-toothed tiger or run away. This explains why even Warren Buffett, one of history's most successful investors, struggled with procrastination early in his career. In 1956, despite having a clear vision of his investment strategy, Buffett found himself constantly overthinking decisions, sometimes spending weeks analyzing companies only to miss crucial buying opportunities. "I was letting perfect be the enemy of good," Buffett later revealed in a shareholders' meeting. "My brain was doing what it thought was protecting me, avoiding risk through endless analysis. But in reality, this protection was holding me back from taking necessary action." Buffett's breakthrough came when he recognized this pattern and developed his famous 2-minute decision rule. If a basic investment decision required more than 2 minutes of deliberation, he would either act immediately or move on entirely. This wasn't about making rash decisions. It was about acknowledging that his brain's excessive caution was often counterproductive. "I realized that my mind would create elaborate justifications for delay, disguising fear as prudence," he explained. "Once I understood this, I could separate genuine analytical needs from my brain's automatic threat response." This brings us to a crucial insight. Procrastination isn't a character flaw. It's your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do. When you postpone an important task, your brain is actually trying to protect you from what it perceives as a threat to your survival. The anxiety about potential failure, judgment, or imperfection triggers the same avoidance mechanisms that once kept your ancestors alive. But here's the good news. Once you understand this mechanism, you can begin to rewire it. This is where the threat-to-treat reframing technique comes into play. The process involves 3 key steps. First, acknowledge that your procrastination is a protective response, not a character flaw. This removes the added layer of self-judgment that often makes procrastination worse. Second, identify the specific threat your brain perceives. Is it fear of failure? Perfectionism? Concern about others' judgments? Understanding the specific trigger allows you to address it directly. Third, consciously reframe the threat as a treat, an opportunity for growth, learning, or simply the satisfaction of completion. This isn't about positive thinking. It's about rewiring your brain's fundamental response to challenges. Think of it like training a nervous rescue dog. The dog's fear responses aren't wrong. They kept it alive in difficult circumstances. But in its new, safe environment, these responses are no longer helpful. Through patient, consistent retraining, the dog can learn new associations and responses. Your brain is capable of similar readjustment. To help you implement this understanding, let's explore the procrastination pattern map exercise. Take a moment to identify 3 tasks you regularly procrastinate on. For each one, ask yourself, what specific sensation arises when you think about starting this task? What story does your brain tell you about what might go wrong? What would make this task feel more like an opportunity than a threat? Understanding your unique procrastination patterns is the first step toward rewiring them. Your brain's protective mechanisms aren't your enemy. They're just outdated allies that need gentle redirection. Remember, every time you feel that urge to procrastinate, you're not experiencing a failure of willpower. You're encountering an ancient survival mechanism that, with understanding and patience, you can update for the modern world. Chapter 3. The High Cost of Waiting for Motivation. David's hands trembled as he stared at the email on his screen, its words burning into his retinas. "We regret to inform you that we've decided to go with another vendor." The $500,000 contract, the biggest opportunity of his small business career, had slipped through his fingers. Not because his company lacked capability, but because he'd waited for the perfect moment to prepare his pitch. For 3 weeks, he'd told himself he needed to feel ready to tackle the proposal. He'd waited for that surge of motivation, that perfect alignment of energy and inspiration that would magically produce his best work. But that moment never came, and now he sat in his office at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, facing the consequences of his waiting game. The truth about motivation is both simpler and more brutal than most people realize. While you're waiting for motivation to strike, life isn't waiting at all. It's moving forward relentlessly, and with it go opportunities, relationships, and dreams, all sacrificed on the altar of someday. The cost of waiting for motivation extends far beyond mere missed opportunities. It compounds silently in the background of your life, accumulating interest like a toxic debt that comes due when you least expect it. This isn't just about procrastination. It's about the insidious belief that we need to feel a certain way before we can take action. Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx and the youngest self-made female billionaire in history, understood this principle early in her entrepreneurial journey. If I had waited until I felt completely ready, Spanx would still be a great idea in my head, she revealed in a 2021 interview. I was terrified. I had no business experience, no fashion experience, and definitely no manufacturing experience. But I knew that waiting for confidence was a luxury I couldn't afford. What's particularly striking about Blakely's story is how she handled the prototype phase of Spanx. Without any formal training, she spent her evenings cutting up pantyhose in her apartment, creating crude prototypes while still working her day job selling fax machines. I didn't wait until I felt motivated or inspired, she explains. I was often exhausted, uncertain, and honestly, sometimes pretty discouraged. But I made a deal with myself. Every single day, I would do at least one thing to move the business forward, regardless of how I felt. This approach, taking action regardless of emotional state, helped Blakely build a billion-dollar empire. But more importantly, it highlights a crucial truth. The cost of waiting for motivation isn't just measured in dollars and cents. It's measured in unrealized potential, in dreams deferred, and in the slow erosion of self-trust that occurs every time we break a promise to ourselves. To understand how to quantify these costs in your own life, let's look at Maya's story. A talented graphic designer, Maya had dreamed of launching her own online course teaching brand design for 5 years. She had the skills, the knowledge, and even a small following on Instagram. What she didn't have, she told herself, was the motivation to get started. I kept waiting to feel ready, Maya recalls. I had this image in my head of waking up one day bursting with energy and confidence, knowing exactly what to do. That day never came. Everything changed when Maya implemented what I call the cost calculation framework. Here's how it works. First, she calculated the minimum monthly income she could generate from her course, $2,000, $20 students at $100 each. Over 5 years of waiting, that's $120,000 in lost potential income. Next, she factored in the opportunity cost. While she waited, 3 other designers in her network launched similar courses, building loyal student bases that could have been hers. Based on their public success, she estimated this cost at another $100,000. Then came the emotional cost. Maya rated her daily anxiety about not pursuing her dream at 7 out of 10. This constant background stress affected her sleep, her current work, and her relationships. While harder to quantify, she estimated this impact at $20,000 in therapy costs and lost productivity. Finally, she calculated the future cost. If she continued waiting another year, how much would that delay cost in terms of lost momentum, market position, and personal growth? She estimated another $50,000. Total cost of waiting, $290,000. And that's just in financial terms. This stark realization hit Maya like a physical force. Seeing those numbers on paper changed everything, she says. I realized I wasn't avoiding risk by waiting for motivation. I was actively choosing to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars and countless opportunities. Within a week of this calculation, Maya took her first concrete step. She outlined her course curriculum. No motivation required, just the clear understanding that waiting was costing her more than any potential failure ever could. The irony is, motivation did come, but only after I started taking action, Maya notes. Now I understand that motivation isn't the precursor to action. It's the reward for taking it. This brings us to a crucial point. Motivation is not a prerequisite for action. It's a result of it. When you wait for motivation to strike before moving forward, you're operating under a fundamentally flawed model of human behavior. Think of motivation like a warm shower. You might not feel the warm water immediately when you step in, but once you're in motion, the warmth follows. Action precedes motivation, not the other way around. The cost calculation framework isn't just about numbers. It's about creating emotional leverage for change. When you clearly see what waiting is costing you, the discomfort of taking action becomes minimal compared to the pain of continued delay. This brings us to your immediate challenge, the 24-hour cost audit. Take out a piece of paper right now. Choose one area where you've been waiting for motivation, whether it's starting a business, improving your health, or pursuing a creative project. Now calculate the following. Be brutally honest with these numbers. Don't soften the blow. Let the full impact hit you. This exercise isn't about making you feel guilty. It's about creating the emotional leverage needed for immediate action. Remember David from our opening story? 6 months after losing that major contract, he did this exact exercise. The results shocked him into a complete transformation of his approach to business. Today, he has a strict 48-hour response policy for all opportunities, regardless of how he feels about them. His business has tripled in size. The question isn't whether waiting for motivation is costing you. It's how much. And more importantly, how much more are you willing to lose before you decide that action, not motivation, is the key to everything you want. Chapter 4. Your action-taking operating system. Have you ever wondered why your smartphone needs regular updates? It's not just about adding new features. It's about fixing bugs, improving performance, and ensuring the system runs at its optimal capacity. Your brain's action-taking mechanism works in surprisingly similar ways. Daniel sat in his dimly lit home office, staring at yet another missed deadline notification. As a senior software developer, he understood systems better than most, except, it seemed, his own internal one. The irony wasn't lost on him. He could debug complex applications with ease, yet couldn't seem to debug his own procrastination patterns. "I keep running the same faulty programs," he muttered, pushing back from his desk. That's when it hit him. He was treating his productivity challenges like a personality trait, when they were actually more like software bugs. His tendency to delay wasn't a fixed characteristic. It was an outdated operating system in desperate need of an upgrade. Think about it. When was the last time you updated your internal operating system? While we readily accept that our devices need regular updates to function optimally, we often treat our mental frameworks for taking action as fixed and unchangeable. This couldn't be further from the truth. Your action operating system is the mental framework that governs how you approach tasks, make decisions, and execute plans. Just like a computer's operating system, it has distinct components that work together to determine your behavior. And just like software, it can become outdated, develop bugs, or run inefficiently if not regularly maintained and updated. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella provides a powerful example of how understanding and updating operating systems, both technological and human, can transform outcomes. When Nadella took the helm at Microsoft in 2014, the company was struggling with what he called operating system paralysis. The organization had become slow to act, trapped in outdated patterns of decision-making and execution. "We needed to fundamentally change how we processed and acted on information," Nadella shared during a 2019 leadership summit. It wasn't just about updating our technology, it was about updating our human operating system for taking action. Under his leadership, Microsoft implemented what he called a growth mindset operating system, which transformed the company's culture from know-it-all to learn-it-all. The results were stunning. Microsoft's market value tripled, and its ability to innovate and execute improved dramatically. But what's most interesting is how Nadella approached this transformation. By treating human behavior patterns with the same systematic attention usually reserved for software updates. Let's look at how Jessica, a talented but struggling artist, used this understanding to transform her creative output. For years, Jessica produced beautiful work, but struggled to complete enough pieces for a gallery showing. Her AOS was running an outdated program that required perfect conditions for creativity. Jessica began by auditing her system. She discovered that her decision triggers were overly dependent on emotional states. Her action thresholds were unrealistically high, her energy management was chaotic, and her feedback loops were nearly non-existent. Using the protocol, she made specific updates. Decision triggers. Instead of waiting for inspiration, she set up environmental triggers. Her studio lights turning on at 9 a.m. became a non-negotiable signal to begin working. Action thresholds. She lowered the conditions required to start painting. Good enough conditions replaced perfect conditions. Energy management. She identified her peak creative hours, early morning, and protected them fiercely for artistic work. Feedback loops. She implemented a daily review process, documenting what worked and what didn't in her creative process. The results were transformative. Within 6 months, Jessica had completed enough pieces for her first gallery showing. More importantly, she had developed a sustainable system for consistent creative output. The good news is that just like software, your AOS can be updated, but it requires conscious effort and systematic approach. You can't just wish for better performance. You need to actively install new patterns and test them in real-world conditions. This brings us to your first practical step, the action audit log. For the next 10 minutes, I want you to document your action patterns from the past 24 hours. Use these prompts. This exercise isn't about judgment. It's about gathering data. Think of yourself as a systems analyst, objectively observing how your current operating system functions. This information will be crucial as we move forward with more advanced upgrades in the coming chapters. Your current action operating system is the result of years of accumulated patterns and beliefs. Some of these serve you well, while others are like outdated code, creating unnecessary bugs in your performance. The key is to approach these patterns not as fixed traits, but as programmable systems that can be optimized and improved. As you complete your action audit log, pay particular attention to patterns that repeat across different situations. These recurring elements often indicate core features of your operating system that might need updating. Don't try to change everything at once. Like any good software update, improvements should be implemented systematically and tested thoroughly. Chapter 5. The Myth of Perfect Timing. The truth about perfect timing is that it doesn't exist. It's a myth as dangerous as it is seductive, promising a magical moment when everything will align, when you'll feel completely ready, when conditions will be optimal, when success will be guaranteed. But here's what successful people understand. That moment never comes. Consider Jeff Bezos's pivotal decision in 1994. As a successful Wall Street executive, he came across a startling statistic. The internet was growing at 2,300% annually. The obvious opportunity made his pulse race, but by conventional wisdom, the timing was terrible. He had a secure job, was on track for a substantial bonus, and the internet was still considered a risky, unproven medium for business. The timing wasn't perfect when Bezos left his job. Amazon's early years were filled with uncertainty, skepticism from investors, and countless technical challenges. But Bezos understood something crucial. The cost of waiting for perfect timing usually exceeds the cost of taking imperfect action. This brings us to a revolutionary concept I call time neutrality, the practice of making decisions based on opportunity cost rather than perfect conditions. Time neutrality isn't about ignoring timing completely. It's about understanding that the perfect moment is usually now, even if conditions seem imperfect. Consider these three fundamental truths about timing. The ready, fire, aim method emerged from studying how successful people navigate timing decisions. Instead of waiting to feel ready, they take action before feeling fully prepared, using real-world feedback to adjust their course. This is exactly what Sophia discovered when she finally launched her YouTube channel after years of hesitation. A high school chemistry teacher with a passion for making science accessible, Sophia had spent countless hours planning her perfect channel launch. "I had this vision of professional lighting, perfect scripts, flawless delivery," she recalls. "Every time I felt almost ready, I'd find one more thing to improve. One more piece of equipment I needed. One more skill to master." The breakthrough came when Sophia discovered the concept of time neutrality. She realized that her pursuit of perfect timing was actually fear in disguise. "I decided to post 30 videos in 30 days, using whatever equipment I had, whatever skills I possessed at that moment." To implement this method in your own life, start by identifying your waiting projects. Those initiatives you've been postponing until the timing is right. These might be personal, starting a workout routine; professional, asking for a promotion; or creative, writing a book. For each project, ask yourself, the power of this approach lies in its ability to break the perfect timing paralysis. When you take action before feeling ready, you discover that readiness often follows action, not the other way around. The myth of perfect timing has kept too many dreams in permanent draft mode. Your podcast remains unrecorded, your book unwritten, your business unlaunched. Not because the timing isn't right, but because you're waiting for a perfect moment that doesn't exist. Remember, the perfect time is rarely perfect, but it's always now. Chapter 6. Breaking the Tomorrow Trap. Think about this for a moment. How many times did you say, "I'll do it tomorrow," in the past week? Research from the University of Pennsylvania shows that the average person uses this phrase approximately 2,190 times per year. That's 6 times every single day, each instance representing a tiny withdrawal from their bank of self-trust. Ryan, a marketing executive in Chicago, discovered this harsh truth when he decided to track his own tomorrow statements for 1 week. Armed with a simple note-taking app on his phone, he logged every instance of pushing tasks to tomorrow. The results left him stunned. Monday morning, "I'll start that report tomorrow." Monday afternoon, "I'll call back that client tomorrow." Monday evening, "I'll definitely hit the gym tomorrow," Ryan recounted, shaking his head. By the end of just 1 week, I had logged 105 tomorrow promises. That's 15 times per day I was lying to myself and others. Ryan's story mirrors a pattern I've observed in thousands of people struggling to take consistent action. The tomorrow trap isn't just about procrastination. It's a sophisticated form of self-deception that creates a dangerous cycle of delayed action and eroded self-trust. To understand why this trap is so powerful, we need to look at what happens in your brain when you say, tomorrow. Neuroscience shows that each time you push a task to tomorrow, your brain experiences a small hit of relief. This temporary relief acts like a reward, reinforcing the habit of delay. It's similar to how a smoker feels momentary relief when lighting up, even though they know it's harmful in the long run. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who built success across multiple domains, from bodybuilding to acting to politics, understood this mechanism intuitively. In his autobiography, Total Recall, he shared a crucial insight that shaped his approach to action-taking. Someone who says, "I'll start my diet tomorrow," will never have a great body. Someone who says, "I'll start my business next month," will never be successful. The tomorrow people are really saying, never. They just don't have the courage to admit it. Schwarzenegger's success wasn't built on motivation or talent alone. It was built on his absolute refusal to fall into the tomorrow trap. "I eliminated tomorrow from my vocabulary when it came to important goals," he explained. Either something was important enough to do today, or it wasn't important at all. This brings us to the 3 psychological mechanisms that make tomorrow such a seductive but dangerous word. Understanding these mechanisms is crucial, but knowledge alone isn't enough. This is where the today contract comes in, a powerful tool for breaking the tomorrow habit. Claire, a graphic designer who dreamed of starting her own agency, used this method to finally break free from years of delay. I had been saying, "I'll start my business tomorrow" for so long that it had become my default response to any opportunity or idea, she recalled. The Today Contract transformed Claire's relationship with action-taking through 3 simple but powerful rules. Claire's implementation of the Today Contract started small. When a potential client reached out about logo design, her instinct was to say she'd respond tomorrow. Instead, she forced herself to send a quick 2-line response immediately. "Thank you for reaching out. I'll send you a detailed proposal by 2 p.m. tomorrow." The difference seems subtle, Claire explained, but it was revolutionary for me. Instead of a vague tomorrow promise, I had made a specific commitment, and by taking immediate action, even just sending that quick response, I broke the pattern of delay. Within 3 months of implementing the Today Contract, Claire had launched her agency, secured 5 regular clients, and developed a reputation for reliability that set her apart from competitors. The most surprising thing wasn't the external success, she noted, but how differently I felt about myself. Each time I chose today over tomorrow, I rebuilt trust with myself. This brings us to the practical application of the Today Contract in your life. The first step is becoming aware of your tomorrow patterns. For the next 24 hours, I want you to track every instance where you're tempted to say or think tomorrow. You'll likely be shocked by how often this happens. The next step is implementing the 3-part response protocol. Let's look at how this plays out in real situations. Instead of, "I'll start exercising tomorrow," convert to, "I'll do 5 push-ups right now and schedule a gym session for 6 p.m. tomorrow." Instead of, "I'll call that client back tomorrow." Convert to, "I'll send a quick text now saying I'll call at 10 a.m. tomorrow." Then immediately schedule it. Instead of, "I'll start my project tomorrow." Convert to, "I'll spend 10 minutes outlining the first step right now." The key is breaking the automatic tomorrow response and replacing it with immediate action, no matter how small. This builds what I call action momentum, the tendency for small actions to naturally lead to larger ones. Your first action step is simple but crucial. Take out your phone or a notebook right now and write down the first tomorrow statement you catch yourself making. Then, apply the Today Contract principles to convert it into immediate action. The tomorrow trap has held you back long enough. It's time to embrace the power of today. Chapter 7. The 5 Action Blockers. Tom sat at his desk, surrounded by a small library of productivity books, their spines cracked from frequent reading. Post-it notes covered his monitor, each displaying a different motivational quote or productivity hack. His calendar was perfectly organized, his goals were smart, and his vision board was prominently displayed. Yet here he was again, frozen in inaction, watching another crucial deadline approach. "I've done everything right," he muttered, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "I've read the books, attended the seminars, followed all the systems. Why am I still stuck?" That moment of frustration led Tom to a breakthrough discovery. What he had always labeled as procrastination was actually 5 distinct psychological barriers operating beneath his awareness. Each of these action blockers required a completely different approach to overcome. Understanding these 5 action blockers is crucial because they explain why generic productivity advice often fails. It's like trying to treat 5 different illnesses with the same medicine. It might help one condition, but leave the others untouched, or even make them worse. Tim Ferriss, best-selling author and entrepreneur, faced this exact challenge while writing The 4-Hour Workweek. In a revealing interview, he shared how identifying these specific blockers transformed his approach to writing. "I kept beating myself up for procrastinating, But once I understood these distinct patterns of resistance, everything changed. Each blocker required its own strategy, its own counterattack. Let's break down these 5 action blockers and understand their unique signatures. This isn't just general anxiety. It's a specific fear response that manifests in seemingly logical delays. It's the voice that says, "Let's do more research first," or "We should wait until we're better prepared." Often mistaken for high standards, perfectionism is actually a form of self-sabotage that creates impossible conditions for action. It's the voice that says, "It's not quite ready yet," or "It needs to be perfect before we launch." This blocker paralyzes you by making tasks appear more complex than they actually are. It's the voice that says, "There's too much to do," or "I don't know where to start." This subtle blocker creates confusion about next steps, making action feel impossible. It's the voice that says, "I'm not sure what to do next," or "I need more information." This blocker manifests as physical and mental fatigue, making action feel impossibly draining. It's the voice that says, "I'm too tired right now," or "I'll have more energy later." Tim Ferriss shared how he developed specific counters for each blocker. For fear of failure, I started using what I call failure preemption. I would intentionally plan for failure scenarios and create contingency plans. This transformed fear from a paralyzing force into a planning tool. For perfectionism, Ferriss adopted a minimum viable chapter approach. I would deliberately write imperfect first drafts, focusing on getting ideas down rather than getting them right. This broke the perfectionist paralysis that had plagued my earlier writing attempts. The blocker breakthrough method emerged from studying how successful people like Ferriss navigate these obstacles. This systematic approach helps you identify and neutralize your primary blockers in real time. Ana Rodriguez, a management consultant in Miami, applied this method to transform her practice. "I was working twice as hard as my colleagues but seeing half the results," she recalled. "The breakthrough came when I realized I was dealing with different blockers at different stages of my work." Anna's story illustrates how the blocker breakthrough method works in practice. She discovered that client acquisition was hampered by fear of failure, while project execution was stalled by perfectionism. By developing specific strategies for each blocker, she was able to triple her client base in 6 months. Here's how Anna applied the method. For fear of failure, created a failure resume, listing past failures and the valuable lessons learned. Developed pre-written responses to potential client objections. Set up regular peer support calls with other consultants. For perfectionism, established clear good enough criteria for each deliverable. Set strict time limits for document revisions. Created templates for common deliverables to prevent endless tweaking. For overwhelm, broke complex projects into 30-minute action blocks. Used a modified Eisenhower matrix for task prioritization. Implemented a 3-tasks-only rule for daily priorities. For lack of clarity, created decision trees for common project scenarios. Established a morning clarity ritual for defining next actions. Used a simple if-then format for project planning. For energy mismanagement, tracked energy levels throughout the day to identify peak performance times. Scheduled high-value work during energy peaks. Built in regular recovery periods between intense work blocks. The key to Anna's success was recognizing that each blocker required a different solution. "Once I stopped treating all my productivity challenges the same way, everything changed," she explained. "I started matching the solution to the specific blocker I was facing." Your action blocker. Battle plan begins with identification. Take a moment now to reflect on your recent instances of delayed action. Which of these patterns sounds most familiar? If you find yourself saying, "I need to do more research first," what if it doesn't work out? "I should wait until I'm more prepared." Your primary blocker is likely fear of failure. If you catch yourself thinking, "It's not quite ready yet," "I need to refine it more," "It has to be perfect before I share it," you're dealing with perfectionism. If you often feel, "There's too much to handle," I don't know where to start. It's all too complicated. Overwhelm is your main blocker. If you frequently think, I'm not sure what to do next, the path forward isn't clear. I need more information. Lack of clarity is holding you back. If you commonly say, I'm too tired to tackle this, I'll have more energy later. I can't focus right now. Energy mismanagement is your challenge. The power of identifying your specific blockers lies in the ability to apply targeted solutions. Generic productivity advice often fails because it doesn't address the root cause of your inaction. Your immediate task is to create your action blocker battle plan. Take out a piece of paper or open a new document. First, identify your top 2 blockers by reviewing recent instances where you've delayed important actions. Then, for each blocker, write down. This becomes your personal reference document, a tactical guide for maintaining momentum when you hit these invisible walls. Chapter 8. Rewiring your decision-making circuit. The human brain is a marvel of complexity, but sometimes this sophistication works against us. In a recent study, chronic procrastinators' brains showed distinctly different activation patterns in the prefrontal cortex, the brain's decision-making center, compared to consistent action takers. This revelation would prove transformative for Marcus, a designer whose business was crumbling under the weight of his inability to make timely decisions. Marcus had built a solid reputation for his creative work, but his business was struggling because he couldn't decide which clients to take on, how to price his services, or when to expand his operations. I would spend hours researching every possible angle of a decision, he recalled. By the time I finally decided, the opportunity had usually passed. His turning point came when he learned about these principles and realized his decision-making circuit wasn't broken. It just needed rewiring. Understanding how his brain processed decisions allowed Marcus to develop specific strategies to overcome his neural patterns. Within 6 months, he had transformed his freelance operation into a thriving agency with 5 employees. Once I understood that my brain was literally wired for overthinking, I could take steps to create new neural pathways, he explained. It wasn't about trying harder. It was about training my brain to process decisions differently. The science behind decision-making reveals why traditional advice like just decide faster or trust your gut often fails to create lasting change. Our brains develop decision-making patterns through years of reinforcement, creating neural pathways that become our default operating system. The good news is that these pathways can be rewired through targeted practice and understanding. This is where the concept of decision velocity becomes crucial. Decision velocity isn't about making hasty choices. It's about optimizing your brain's decision-making circuit to process information and reach conclusions more efficiently. Think of it like upgrading your computer's processor. The same information comes in, but it's handled more effectively and produces results faster. Elon Musk's approach to decision-making provides a masterclass in developing high decision velocity. In a revealing interview about his early days at Tesla and SpaceX, Musk shared how he developed his first principles method for cutting through decision paralysis. When faced with complex decisions, people tend to reason by analogy, which essentially means copying what others have done with slight variations, Musk explained. But reasoning from first principles means breaking down a situation into its fundamental truths and then reasoning up from there. Musk's method proved particularly powerful when he needed to decide whether to launch Tesla's first vehicle as a high-end sports car rather than a more practical family car. By breaking down the decision to its fundamental elements, technology costs, market dynamics, and brand positioning, he could move past the traditional auto industry wisdom and make a bold decision that ultimately proved correct. The key insight from Musk's approach isn't just about the method itself, but about how he trained his brain to process decisions differently. Every time you force yourself to reason from first principles, instead of falling back on established patterns, you're literally creating new neural pathways, he noted. Over time, this becomes your default way of thinking. This understanding of neural plasticity, our brain's ability to form new pathways through repeated practice, is central to developing higher decision velocity. When you consistently engage in rapid, structured decision-making, you're not just making individual choices, you're training your brain to process decisions more efficiently. The 3-2-1 decision protocol emerged from this understanding of neural rewiring. This protocol provides a structured approach to making decisions quickly while ensuring quality outcomes. The method breaks down complex decisions into 3 core elements, requires 2 contrasting perspectives, and demands 1 immediate action step. Rachel Wong's story illustrates the transformative power of this protocol. After spending 3 years planning and researching her online fitness business, Rachel found herself no closer to launching than when she started. "I had spreadsheets full of data, market research reports, and competitor analyses," she recalled. "But I couldn't pull the trigger on actually starting." When Rachel learned about the 3-2-1 decision protocol, she initially resisted its simplicity. "It seemed too basic for the complex decisions I was facing," she admitted. "But I decided to try it for just 1 week. That week changed everything." Using the protocol, Rachel made more progress in 7 days than she had in the previous 7 months. Here's how she applied it to her business launch. 3 core elements. She identified the 3 fundamental factors that would determine her success: her unique expertise, market demand, and technical feasibility. 2 perspectives. She forced herself to consider both best-case and worst-case scenarios for each decision, rather than getting lost in endless possibilities. 1 action step. For every decision, she immediately identified and took 1 concrete action step, no matter how small. "The protocol didn't just help me make decisions, it rewired how I think about decision-making," Rachel explained. Within 6 months, she had launched her business, secured her first 100 clients, and developed a clear expansion strategy. "The decisions I agonized over for years now take me minutes or hours at most." The power of the 3-2-1 protocol lies in its ability to create new neural pathways through consistent practice. Each time you use it, you're strengthening your brain's capacity for efficient decision-making. The protocol works because it provides enough structure to prevent analysis paralysis while maintaining enough flexibility to handle complex decisions. To implement the protocol effectively, start with smaller decisions and gradually work up to more significant ones. This progressive training approach allows your brain to build confidence and competence in rapid decision-making. Think of it like building a muscle. You don't start with the heaviest weights, but gradually increase the load as your strength improves. The Quick Decision Challenge serves as your first training session in developing higher decision velocity. In the next 5 minutes, you'll make 10 decisions about your immediate future. These decisions don't need to be life-changing. The goal is to practice making clear choices quickly. Take out a piece of paper or open a notes app. You'll receive 10 prompts, and you must decide within 30 seconds for each one. Don't worry about making the perfect choice. Focus on making a clear decision quickly. The challenge begins now. After completing the challenge, reflect on how it felt to make rapid decisions. Notice any resistance or discomfort. These feelings. Chapter 9. The 3-second action rule. The air was thick with tension at the 2008 Beijing Olympics as Michael Phelps stood behind the starting block. In that moment, as he would later reveal, his entire career, all the years of training, all the sacrifices, all the dreams, condensed into a critical 3-second window. People see the race, the dive, the strokes, Phelps shared. But what they don't see is that tiny moment between hearing the starter and taking action. That's where champions are made. This wasn't just about swimming. Phelps had discovered something fundamental about human performance, a truth that would revolutionize our understanding of action-taking. In those 3 seconds between stimulus and response, between thought and action, lies the difference between excellence and mediocrity, between achieving our dreams and forever wondering, what if? What Phelps intuited through experience, neuroscience has now confirmed. our brains have a critical 3-second window for taking action before our internal resistance mechanisms activate. This discovery explains why some people seem to effortlessly take action, while others remain stuck in perpetual preparation. Think about the last time you had a clear impulse to do something important. Make that call, start that project, have that difficult conversation. What happened in the seconds immediately following that thought? If you're like most people, you probably felt a brief moment of clarity and motivation, followed quickly by doubts, reasons to delay, or sudden distractions. This isn't a character flaw. It's your brain's ancient survival mechanism doing exactly what it evolved to do: protect you from potential threats by encouraging careful consideration before action. But in our modern world, this otherwise helpful mechanism often works against us. The threats we face today aren't predators or physical dangers. They're missed opportunities, unfulfilled potential, and the slow erosion of our dreams through inaction. This is where the 3-second rule becomes transformative. Navy SEAL Commander Jocko Willink understands this principle better than most. In his extensive combat experience, he observed that the difference between success and failure often came down to immediate action-taking. In combat, you don't have the luxury of waiting for perfect conditions or complete information, Willink explains. You have to take action in the face of uncertainty. The longer you wait, the more likely things are to go wrong. Willink's concept of extreme ownership of the immediate moment aligns perfectly with the neuroscience of the 3-second rule. When you take ownership of those crucial 3 seconds, you bypass your brain's resistance mechanisms before they can fully activate. This isn't about being reckless. It's about recognizing that in most situations, immediate imperfect action beats perfect delayed action. The 3-second activation protocol consists of 3 key elements. First is recognition, learning to identify actionable thoughts when they occur. These are the moments when you have a clear impulse to do something that would move you toward your goals. The key is distinguishing these productive impulses from random thoughts or distractions. Second is immediate physical movement. Within 3 seconds of recognizing an actionable thought, you must make a physical movement toward taking action. This could be as simple as opening your laptop, picking up your phone, or standing up from your chair. The physical movement triggers what psychologists call behavioral commitment. Once you start moving, you're much more likely to continue. Third is momentum maintenance. Once you've initiated action, focus solely on maintaining forward movement, no matter how small. Don't worry about perfection or completion. Just keep taking the next small step. The 3-second revolution challenge is designed to help you build this skill through consistent practice. For the next week, commit to responding to every actionable thought within 3 seconds, when safe and appropriate to do so. Keep a simple note on your phone or a small notebook where you track each instance. Don't worry about success or failure. Focus on building awareness of these crucial moments and your response to them. Each evening, take a moment to reflect on your experiences. Notice patterns in when you succeed and when you hesitate. Pay attention to how different types of actions trigger different levels of resistance. Most importantly, observe how your relationship with action-taking begins to shift as you build this new habit. Remember, the goal isn't to make hasty decisions or act impulsively. The goal is to eliminate the gap between deciding and doing, to stop letting good intentions die in the quicksand of delay. As Phelps discovered on that starting block in Beijing, excellence isn't about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about seizing the moment you have. Chapter 10. Environment Design for Instant Action. Kevin stood in his office doorway, a mix of disbelief and revelation on his face. Just 7 days earlier, he'd been drowning in unfinished projects and missed deadlines, despite his role as a senior tech executive at a Fortune 500 company. Now, his task completion rate had tripled, and for the first time in years, he felt in control of his workflow. The catalyst for this transformation wasn't another productivity app or time management system. It was a simple reorganization of his physical workspace. "I had this moment of clarity," Kevin shared. "I realized my environment was making most of my decisions for me. Every time I sat down to work on something important, my space was silently nudging me toward distraction or procrastination. His revelation came after tracking his movements and decisions throughout a typical workday. The results were startling. Approximately 80% of his actions were triggered by environmental cues rather than conscious choices. This discovery led Kevin to conduct what he called his office redesign experiment. He removed every item from his office and only returned things that directly supported focused work. The transformation was immediate and profound. Without the usual environmental friction, taking action became his default state rather than something he had to force himself to do. Your environment is not neutral. Every space you occupy is either working for or against your goals. This principle, which I call action architecture, explains why you might feel productive in a coffee shop but scattered at home, or focused in the morning but distracted by afternoon. Your surroundings are constantly sending signals that either trigger or inhibit action. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, discovered this truth while writing his best-selling book. "I used to think writing was about willpower and discipline," he told me during our conversation. "But when I completely redesigned my workspace to make writing the path of least resistance, the words started flowing naturally. The environment was doing the heavy lifting for me." Clear's experience highlights a fundamental truth about human behavior. We consistently underestimate how much our surroundings influence our actions. Research from the field of environmental psychology shows that up to 90% of our daily behaviors are triggered by environmental cues rather than conscious decisions. The environment override protocol consists of 3 phases: audit, design, and implement. In the audit phase, you track your movements and decisions throughout your typical day, noting where environmental factors either support or hinder your desired actions. Pay particular attention to transition points, moments when you need to switch from one type of task to another. During the design phase, you create a detailed plan for optimizing your space based on your audit findings. This includes mapping out your energy zones, identifying and eliminating friction points, and planning the placement of visual triggers. The goal is to make your desired actions as easy as possible, while making undesired actions require extra effort. The implementation phase involves making the physical changes to your environment and establishing new routines that leverage these changes. This might include reorganizing your workspace, adjusting lighting and temperature controls, or creating new storage systems. Your digital environment deserves equal attention in this process. Many of us spend more time in digital spaces than physical ones, yet we rarely optimize these environments for action. Notice how your computer desktop is organized, how many clicks it takes to access important files, or how your notification settings either support or disrupt your focus. The protocol also extends to your mobile devices. The apps on your home screen, your notification settings, and even your wallpaper can either trigger productive action or lead to distraction. The key is to design these digital spaces with the same intentionality you bring to physical environments. One crucial aspect of environmental design is what I call the preparation zone, a dedicated space where you stage everything needed for your next important action. This might be a clear desk with your project materials laid out for the next morning, or a workout area with your exercise clothes and equipment ready to go. The power of the preparation zone lies in its ability to reduce startup friction. When everything you need is ready and waiting, you're much more likely to take immediate action rather than procrastinate. This is particularly effective for morning routines or after-work activities when your decision-making energy might be depleted. Another key element is the concept of action anchors, physical objects or arrangements that trigger specific behaviors. For example, a dedicated reading chair can become an anchor for focused study time, or a specific desk setup might trigger writing behavior. The key is consistency, using the same environmental cues repeatedly until they become automatic triggers for desired actions. To help you begin implementing these principles immediately, I've designed the 60-minute Environment Reset Challenge. This focused session requires you to make 3 specific changes to your immediate environment that will reduce friction for your most important daily actions. Choose one space where you spend significant time working or pursuing important goals. This might be your home office, workout area, or creative space. Set a timer for 60 minutes and make 3 concrete changes that will support your desired actions. Document these changes with before and after photos and commit to maintaining them for 1 week. These changes might include reorganizing your desk so all essential tools are within arm's reach, creating a dedicated space for your most important morning activity, setting up a preparation zone for your next significant project. The key is to focus on changes that will have an immediate impact on your ability to take action. Don't worry about perfection. You can always refine your environment over time. The goal is to start experiencing the power of environmental design right away. Chapter 11. Energy Management versus Time Management. David sat in his meticulously organized office, staring at his perfectly crafted schedule with a mix of frustration and defeat. As the CEO of a rapidly growing tech startup, he'd mastered every time management technique available. His calendar was a work of art, broken down into 15-minute increments. His task lists were prioritized with military precision. Yet despite this apparent mastery of time, he still found himself procrastinating on crucial projects and feeling perpetually exhausted. I was doing everything right according to every productivity book I'd read, David later shared. But I kept hitting this invisible wall. Some days, even with a clear schedule and important deadlines, I couldn't make myself take action. Other days, usually at odd hours, I'd find myself in an incredible flow state, knocking out complex tasks with ease. That's when it hit me. I wasn't having a time management problem. I was having an energy management crisis. This realization marked the beginning of a fundamental shift in how David approached productivity and action-taking. Instead of forcing himself to work on important tasks during his designated time blocks, he began tracking his energy levels throughout the day. The patterns he discovered transformed his entire approach to work and led to a 40% increase in his productive output while actually working fewer hours. Time management, while important, is only half the equation when it comes to taking consistent action. You can have all the time in the world, but without the right energy, you'll still find yourself procrastinating or producing subpar results. This is why so many traditional productivity systems fail. They focus exclusively on when you should do something, without thinking whether you'll have the energy to do it effectively. Tony Robbins, who has coached world leaders and top performers for over 4 decades, shared a profound insight during our conversation about this topic. People come to me thinking they need better time management, he said. But what they really need is better energy management. Time is finite. We all get the same 24 hours. Energy, however, can be expanded, contracted, and most importantly, optimized. When you learn to manage your energy first, time management becomes almost effortless. Robbins went on to describe how his famous morning priming routine, a combination of breathing exercises, cold exposure, and intentional movement, wasn't developed for time efficiency, but for energy optimization. Before I do anything else, I focus on getting my energy right. Because I know that if my energy is low or scattered, no amount of time management will help me take powerful action. This brings us to the Energy First framework, which breaks down human energy into 4 distinct but interconnected types: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Understanding and optimizing each type is crucial for consistent action-taking. Physical energy forms the foundation of all action. It's not just about being awake or asleep. It's about the quality of energy available to your body at any given moment. This includes factors like nutrition, sleep quality, movement patterns, and breathing. When your physical energy is optimal, taking action feels natural and effortless. When it's depleted, even simple tasks can feel overwhelming. Emotional energy relates to your feeling states and their impact on your ability to take action. This encompasses everything from motivation and confidence to anxiety and resistance. Your emotional energy can either amplify or dampen your physical energy, making it a crucial factor in overcoming procrastination. Mental energy involves your cognitive resources, your ability to focus, make decisions, and think creatively. This type of energy is particularly finite, which is why many people find themselves procrastinating on important tasks later in the day, even if they have physical energy available. Spiritual energy connects to your sense of purpose and meaning. It's the energy that comes from knowing why you're taking action and how it aligns with your larger goals and values. When spiritual energy is high, you can overcome significant physical, emotional, or mental energy deficits through sheer sense of purpose. Nina's story perfectly illustrates how understanding and applying these energy principles can transform your ability to take action. As a marketing manager with dreams of starting her own consulting business, Nina initially tried to launch her side venture by carving out time blocks in her already packed schedule. Despite her best efforts, she found herself consistently procrastinating during these designated work periods. "I was trying to force myself to work on my business every evening after my day job," Nina explained. "But I was completely ignoring the fact that by 7 p.m., my mental energy was usually depleted from a full day of meetings and decision-making. I had the time, but I didn't have the right kind of energy for strategic work." Everything changed when Nina discovered the personal energy matrix, a tool for mapping different types of energy throughout the day and matching tasks to optimal energy states. She began tracking her energy patterns and made a surprising discovery. While her evenings were low in mental energy, she had significant physical and creative energy during these hours. Meanwhile, her early mornings, especially after exercise, were peak times for mental focus and strategic thinking. Using this insight, Nina completely restructured her approach. Instead of forcing herself to work on business strategy in the evenings, she used this time for tasks that aligned with her available energy, things like design work, social media content creation, and relationship building with potential clients. She shifted her strategic planning and complex problem-solving to early morning sessions, working for just 90 minutes before her day job when her mental energy was at its peak. The results were remarkable. Within 6 months, Nina had built enough momentum in her consulting business to transition to it full-time. "The key wasn't finding more time," she reflected. "It was understanding and working with my energy patterns instead of against them." The personal energy matrix works by helping you map your energy patterns across all 4 energy types throughout the day. This creates a comprehensive picture of when you're best suited for different kinds of tasks. The process begins with awareness, tracking your energy levels and noting patterns and how they affect your ability to take action. To implement this system in your own life, start by creating a simple energy log. For each time block in your day, rate your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual energy levels on a scale of 1 to 10. Also note what activities you're engaged in and how effectively you're able to take action during these periods. After a week of tracking, clear patterns will emerge. You might discover, for instance, that your mental energy peaks in the morning but crashes after lunch, or that your emotional energy is highest after exercise. You might find that certain types of meetings drain your spiritual energy, while others replenish it. These insights become powerful tools for planning when to tackle different types of tasks. The next step is to categorize your most important activities based on the type of energy they primarily require. Strategic planning, for instance, demands high mental energy. Creative work often requires a combination of emotional and mental energy. Physical tasks, naturally, depend primarily on physical energy. Building relationships might draw more on emotional and spiritual energy. Once you understand both your energy patterns and the energy requirements of your tasks, you can begin matching them strategically. This is where the real power of energy management reveals itself. Instead of forcing yourself to work against your natural energy rhythms, you align your activities with your energy peaks. This approach also helps explain why traditional time management often fails to prevent procrastination. When you schedule a task without considering the energy it requires, you're essentially setting yourself up for failure. It's like trying to run a marathon immediately after completing a triathlon. You might have the time available, but you won't have the energy necessary for optimal performance. The Energy First framework also introduces the concept of energy investment versus energy expenditure. Some activities, like exercise or meditation, might seem to take energy in the moment, but actually generate more energy in the return. Other activities might seem passive, but actually drain significant energy reserves. Understanding this dynamic helps you make better decisions about how to use your available energy and how to replenish it effectively. To help you begin implementing these principles immediately, I've designed the 7-day energy tracking journal exercise. This simple but powerful tool will help you create your own personal energy matrix and begin making energy-conscious decisions about when to take action. For the next week, keep a simple journal noting your energy levels and patterns. 3 times each day, morning, afternoon, and evening, rate your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual energy levels. Note what activities you've engaged in and how they've affected your energy state. Pay particular attention to times when you find yourself naturally taking action versus procrastinating. This isn't about judging your patterns or forcing yourself to change them immediately. The goal is simply to become aware of your natural energy rhythms and how they impact your ability to take action. This awareness alone will begin to transform how you approach productivity and task management. Remember, the key to consistent action taking isn't managing time better, it's managing energy better. When you align your actions with your natural energy patterns, procrastination begins to dissolve, and taking action becomes your default state. Chapter 12. The Power of Micro-Commitments. Jason stood in front of his bathroom mirror, shoulders slumped, staring at the gym membership card he'd purchased 6 months ago. Like the 3 cards before it, this one had barely seen the light of day. The familiar wave of shame washed over him as he contemplated yet another failed attempt at getting fit. But this time, something different happened. A moment of clarity that would transform not just his fitness journey, but his entire approach to personal change. "I'm done with grand plans," he declared to his reflection. "Just 1 push-up. That's all I'm committing to today." It seemed almost ridiculous. How could 1 push-up make any difference? But in that moment of lowering his expectations to the point of absurdity, Jason unknowingly tapped into one of the most powerful forces in human behavior change: the power of micro-commitments. That single push-up turned into 2 the next day, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. By week's end, he was doing 10, then 20. 18 months later, Jason crossed the finish line of his first marathon, a transformation that began with a commitment so small it seemed meaningless at the time. The science behind micro-commitments reveals why they're so effective at creating lasting change. When you commit to an action so small it seems almost trivial, you bypass your brain's threat detection system, the amygdala, which typically triggers resistance when faced with challenging goals. This creates a unique opportunity to establish new neural pathways without triggering the fear and overwhelm that often lead to procrastination. The neuroscience supports this approach. Studies have shown that the brain responds more positively to small, consistent wins than to occasional large achievements. Each time you complete a micro-commitment, your brain releases dopamine, reinforcing the action-taking pathway. Over time, this creates a positive feedback loop that makes taking action your default state, rather than something you have to force yourself to do. Here's what you need to do. First, identify your ultimate goal, what you'd ideally like to accomplish. Then, reduce that goal to its smallest possible unit of measurement. If it's exercise, this might be a single push-up or 1 minute of movement. For writing, it might be 1 sentence. For business development, it could be 1 phone call or email. Next, set your initial commitment at roughly 10% of what feels easily doable. This might seem counterintuitive, but remember, we're building a pattern of consistent action, not trying to make immediate progress. The easy wins in the beginning create momentum that naturally leads to larger actions later. Finally, establish a clear trigger for your micro-commitment, a specific time or situation that will prompt your action. This could be as simple as after brushing my teeth or before checking email. The key is to anchor your micro-commitment to an existing habit or specific time of day. The power of this method lies in its ability to bypass the mental resistance that typically accompanies behavior change. When your commitment is small enough, your brain doesn't register it as a threat or challenge. This allows you to focus entirely on building the action habit, without the emotional baggage that often comes with larger goals. To help you implement this approach immediately, I've designed the 2-Minute Revolution Challenge. This simple but powerful exercise will help you establish 3 new action patterns using the principle of micro-commitments. Here's how it works. Choose 3 goals you've been procrastinating on, areas where you want to make progress but have been struggling to take consistent action. For each goal, design a micro-commitment that takes no more than 2 minutes to complete. The key is to make these commitments so small that they feel almost meaningless. For example, if you want to start a meditation practice, commit to 1 minute of mindful breathing. If you want to get organized, commit to filing 1 piece of paper. If you want to start a business, commit to spending 2 minutes each day researching or planning. For the next week, focus solely on completing these 2-minute commitments. Use a simple checkmark system to track your consistency. Don't worry about making significant progress toward your larger goals. That will come naturally over time. For now, focus entirely on building the action habit through these tiny, consistent wins. Remember, the goal isn't to achieve massive results in 2 minutes. The goal is to establish the neural pathways of consistent action. Once these pathways are established, scaling up your commitments becomes much easier because you've already built the foundation of consistent action taking. Chapter 13. Action Anchoring Fundamentals. Robert stared at his sales performance chart, a puzzling pattern emerging from the data. Some days he closed deal after deal with seemingly effortless momentum, while others felt like pushing against an invisible wall. What made the difference? The answer came to him one morning as he sat at his favorite coffee shop, reviewing his numbers for the 100th time. His best days always, without exception, followed his morning coffee ritual. Not just drinking coffee, but the entire experience of walking to his local cafe, greeting the barista, and reviewing his goals while enjoying that first cup. This revelation sparked a transformation that would take him from the bottom of his sales team to the top 1% within 6 months. But more importantly, it unveiled a fundamental truth about human behavior that you're about to discover: the power of action anchoring. What Robert stumbled upon was more than just a coincidence. It was a glimpse into one of the most powerful mechanisms of human behavior change. He began intentionally anchoring key sales activities to specific moments in his day, turning ordinary routines into launching pads for purposeful action. His morning coffee became the anchor for client outreach. The afternoon elevator ride to his apartment became his trigger for follow-up calls. Even the walk to his car each evening became an anchor for planning the next day's priorities. The science behind action anchoring reveals why this approach is so effective. Your brain is constantly looking for patterns and cues in your environment to conserve energy. When you consistently pair a new action with an existing habit, you're essentially hijacking your brain's natural pattern recognition system. This creates what neuroscientists call a behavioral cascade. One action automatically triggering another without requiring conscious effort or willpower. Mark Cuban shared with me how this principle played a crucial role in building his first successful business. "Everyone talks about my work ethic," he said, "but what they don't see is the system behind it. I didn't rely on motivation or discipline. I built my success by attaching specific business actions to things I was already doing every day." Cuban revealed how he turned his morning shower into a brainstorming session for new business ideas, his daily commute into a time for sales calls, and his evening TV watching into a period for reading industry news. "I wasn't adding new time commitments to my day," he explained. "I was simply leveraging existing routines as triggers for important actions. This made consistency automatic rather than something I had to force." This insight is particularly powerful because it addresses one of the biggest challenges in personal development: the sustainability of new habits. Traditional approaches often fail because they require adding new routines to an already busy life. Action anchoring, on the contrary, works by integrating desired behaviors into your existing flow, making them feel natural rather than forced. The power of this method lies in its ability to create what I call action momentum, the phenomenon where one successfully completed action increases the likelihood of taking further positive actions. By anchoring important tasks to existing routines, you create a series of small wins throughout your day, each building upon the last. This brings us to a crucial insight about behavior change. The most sustainable transformations often come not from dramatic overhauls, but from strategic integration of new actions into existing patterns. Action anchoring allows you to leverage the stability of your current routines while gradually building new capabilities and habits. To help you implement this approach immediately, I've designed the Anchor Discovery exercise. This simple but powerful tool will help you identify your most promising anchor points and attach meaningful actions to them. Here's how it works. Take a moment to list your 5 most consistent daily habits, those activities you perform almost without thinking. These might include making coffee, commuting to work, checking email, taking lunch, or preparing for bed. These are your potential anchor points. For each of these habits, design one small but meaningful action that would move you toward your goals. The key is to choose actions that feel natural in the context of your anchor point and can be completed without disrupting your normal flow. For the next 3 days, experiment with these anchored actions, noting which combinations feel most natural and effective. Pay attention to both the practical fit, timing, context, energy levels, and the psychological fit, how natural the pairing feels. The goal isn't to maintain all 5 anchored actions permanently. Rather, use this exercise to discover which anchor points in your day have the most potential for supporting new behaviors. Chapter 14. Strategic Discomfort Training. Adam stood shivering in his swim trunks at the edge of Lake Michigan in December, questioning every life choice that had led him to this moment. The cold exposure workshop had seemed like an interesting personal challenge when he signed up, but now, facing the icy water, he felt his body screaming to retreat to warmth and safety. Yet something profound happened in those moments between resistance and action, a realization that would transform his entire approach to business and life. As he forced himself to take that first step into the frigid water, Adam noticed how the pattern of resistance, fear, and eventual action perfectly mirrored his experience in business situations. The same mental barriers that made him hesitate before cold water were identical to those that prevented him from making important sales calls or launching new initiatives. This insight sparked a journey into what I now call strategic discomfort training, a systematic approach to building your capacity for taking action under pressure. What Adam discovered through his cold water experiences wasn't just about physical endurance. Each controlled exposure to discomfort was actually rewiring his brain's threat response system, creating new neural pathways that made future challenges feel more manageable. He began deliberately seeking out small, uncomfortable situations, speaking up in meetings, initiating difficult conversations, taking on challenging projects, and treating them as opportunities for discomfort training. The science behind this approach reveals something fascinating about human psychology. Your brain's threat response system doesn't distinguish between physical and psychological discomfort. The same mechanisms that help you adapt to cold water also help you adapt to business challenges, public speaking, or any other situation that triggers resistance. This insight opens up powerful possibilities for systematic resilience building. David Goggins, former Navy SEAL and ultramarathon runner, shared with me how he developed this principle into what he calls the cookie jar method. Most people try to avoid discomfort at all costs, he explained. But discomfort is actually a tool, perhaps the most powerful tool we have for personal growth. Every time you push through discomfort, you're not just accomplishing that specific task, you're building a psychological resource bank that you can draw from in future challenges. Goggins described how he systematically exposed himself to increasingly challenging situations, starting with small daily discomforts, like taking cold showers or doing extra repetitions in workouts. Each successful navigation of discomfort became a cookie in his mental cookie jar, evidence of his capability to push through resistance. The key, he emphasized, is not the intensity of the challenge, but the consistency of facing discomfort head-on. Let's talk about Michelle's transformation from anxiety-driven procrastination to confident public speaking. As a marketing manager, her fear of public presentation was limiting her career advancement. Rather than trying to overcome this fear through positive thinking or motivation, she applied the principles of strategic discomfort training through what I call the discomfort ladder. The discomfort ladder is a structured approach to gradually increasing your tolerance for challenging situations. Michelle began with the smallest possible step, recording herself giving a 1-minute presentation alone in her room. Once this became comfortable, she moved up to presenting to her cat, then to family members, then to small groups of supportive colleagues. Each rung on the ladder represented a manageable increase in discomfort. The key was making each step small enough that it felt challenging but not overwhelming, Michelle shared. I wasn't trying to conquer my fear all at once. Instead, I was gradually building my capacity for discomfort. Within 6 months, she was confidently delivering presentations to hundreds of people at industry conferences. The discomfort ladder works because it honors a crucial principle of neuroplasticity. Sustainable change happens at the edge of your comfort zone, not way beyond it. Each step should trigger enough discomfort to stimulate growth, but not so much that it overwhelms your adaptive capacity. This principle applies to any area where resistance holds you back. Whether you're building a business, developing a new skill, or changing careers, the key is to create your own progressive discomfort training program. Start with challenges that feel slightly uncomfortable but manageable, then gradually increase the intensity as your capacity grows. The protocol involves 3 key elements: exposure, recovery, and reflection. Exposure is the controlled confrontation with discomfort, taking that cold shower, initiating that difficult conversation, or tackling that challenging task. Recovery is equally important. It's the period where your system integrates the experience and builds resilience. Reflection involves documenting both your resistance levels and actual outcomes, building evidence of your growing capacity. Your weekly discomfort challenge is designed to help you begin this process immediately. Choose one small but uncomfortable action to perform daily for the next week. This might be taking a 30-second cold shower, speaking up in meetings, or reaching out to someone you admire professionally. The key is to choose something that triggers noticeable resistance, but feels achievable. Each day, before taking action, rate your resistance level on a scale of 1 to 10. After completing the action, rate the actual difficulty of the experience. Keep a simple log of these numbers, along with any insights or observations. This data will become powerful evidence of your growing resilience, showing you how perceived threats often don't match reality. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate discomfort. It's to build your capacity to take action despite it. Through strategic discomfort training, you're not just developing specific skills, you're rewiring your brain's fundamental approach to challenges. Each small victory over resistance builds the neural pathways that make future actions easier, creating an upward spiral of capability and confidence. Chapter 15. The Momentum Principle. Picture a simple physics demonstration I once witnessed in a high school classroom. 2 identical marbles were placed at the top of 2 seemingly identical ramps. The only difference? One ramp was angled just 1 degree lower than the other. As the marbles were released simultaneously, they began their journey similarly. But by the time they reached the bottom, the slight difference in angle had created a remarkable gap in their final positions, nearly 2 feet apart. This tiny initial difference in trajectory had compounded into a massive divergence in destination. This demonstration perfectly captures the story of Carlos, a freelancer who discovered the transformative power of what I call the momentum principle. Like many freelancers, Carlos had spent years stuck in the feast or famine cycle, constantly starting over with each new project. His breakthrough came when he realized that his approach to business growth mirrored those two marbles. Tiny, consistent adjustments in his daily actions could lead to exponential differences in outcomes. "I used to think success required massive, dramatic changes," Carlo shared with me. "But what actually transformed my business was implementing one small, consistent action each day." He began by spending just 15 minutes every morning reaching out to past clients, not with sales pitches, but with valuable insights or resources related to their industries. This tiny daily action seemed insignificant at first, like that 1-degree difference in the marble experiment. But within 3 months, something remarkable started happening. Those consistent touches led to repeat projects, which led to referrals, which led to larger opportunities. By month 6, he had hired his first employee. By month 12, he had a team of 5. And 18 months after implementing this simple daily practice, his one-person freelance operation had transformed into a thriving agency serving major brands. This brings us to what I call the momentum formula, a precise understanding of how small actions compound to create unstoppable forward motion. To truly grasp this concept, I turn to someone who has mastered it at the highest level: Oprah Winfrey. During our conversation about building her media empire, she shared a philosophy that perfectly encapsulates the momentum principle. "People often ask me about the moment everything changed," Oprah explained, expecting to hear about some dramatic breakthrough. But the truth is, there was no single moment. Success came from consistently taking what I call the next right move, focusing not on the ultimate destination, but on the immediate next step that would move me forward. She described how, even in the early days of her local Chicago talk show, she approached each day not with grand ambitions of building a media empire, but with a simple question: what's the next right move I can make right now? This approach, which might seem too simple to be powerful, actually aligns perfectly with the science of how momentum works in human behavior. Through years of studying high achievers and analyzing behavioral research, I've identified 4 distinct phases of momentum building that everyone must navigate: initiation, acceleration, breakthrough, and maintenance. Understanding these phases is crucial because each requires a different strategy and mindset. The initiation phase is where most people struggle because it's where resistance is highest and results are lowest. This is where you're like that marble at the very top of the ramp, requiring the most energy to get moving. During this phase, the key is to focus on actions so small they seem almost insignificant. Your brain's resistance mechanisms are highly sensitive at this stage, so any action that feels too big will trigger procrastination. The acceleration phase begins once you've established a consistent pattern of small actions. This is where the physics of momentum really kicks in. Each action becomes slightly easier than the last, and results begin to compound. During this phase, it's crucial to maintain consistency while gradually increasing the scope of your actions. The breakthrough phase is where exponential results start to appear. This is often where people experience what looks like overnight success to outside observers, even though it's actually the predictable result of consistent action over time. The challenge during this phase is not getting overwhelmed by the increasing opportunities and maintaining the fundamental behaviors that created the momentum. The maintenance phase is about sustaining momentum while adapting to new challenges that come with success. This is where many people falter, thinking they can ease up on the fundamental actions that got them there. The key is understanding that momentum requires constant feeding. You never graduate from the need for consistent action. To translate these phases into practical application, I developed the momentum mapping method, a systematic approach to building and maintaining positive action momentum. No one demonstrates the power of this method better than Hannah Chen, a former chronic procrastinator who transformed herself into a successful author using these exact principles. The momentum mapping method works because it aligns with how our brains naturally build and maintain habits. It starts with creating a visual momentum map for your goal, identifying specific actions for each phase of the momentum journey. This map becomes your navigation tool, helping you understand exactly where you are in the process and what actions are appropriate for your current phase. For example, if you're in the initiation phase of a fitness goal, your mapped actions might be as small as putting on your workout clothes or doing one push-up. As you enter the acceleration phase, these actions naturally expand to include longer workouts or more challenging exercises. The key is matching your actions to your current momentum phase rather than trying to jump ahead. This brings us to the Momentum Starter Challenge, which I've designed to help you immediately apply these principles in your life. Tonight, before you go to bed, you'll identify your 3 most important goals. For each goal, you must take one tiny action, something so small it feels almost insignificant. Then, crucially, you'll plan and commit to your next action for tomorrow, creating a momentum bridge between today and tomorrow. This challenge works because it combines 3 key elements of momentum building: immediate action, no matter how small; future commitment, creating a pull toward your next step; and multiple goal alignment, building momentum across different areas simultaneously. The accompanying momentum tracker helps you visualize your progress over the next 5 days, reinforcing the connection between consistent action and growing momentum. Remember, like those marbles in the physics demonstration, tiny differences in your daily actions can lead to massive differences in your ultimate destination. The key is not the size of the actions you take, but the consistency with which you take them. By understanding and applying the momentum principle, you can transform any goal from a standing start into unstoppable forward motion. Chapter 16. From Planning to Doing. When I first heard Andrew's story, I was struck by a number that changed my entire perspective on the relationship between planning and action. Andrew, a talented marketing professional, had meticulously tracked his time while preparing to launch his consulting business. When he finally analyzed the data, the result was staggering. 127 hours spent on planning, creating spreadsheets, drafting proposals, designing logos, writing mission statements, and exactly 0 hours spent on actual execution. "I thought I was being thorough and professional," Andrew told me during our conversation. "I had convinced myself that each new planning session was essential preparation. The truth? I was hiding from real action behind a shield of sophisticated procrastination." What makes Andrew's story particularly powerful is what happened next. After this shocking realization, he completely reversed his approach. Instead of perfect plans, he focused on immediate action. The results were transformative. Within 18 months, he had launched and was successfully running 3 distinct business ventures, all in less time than he had previously spent planning just one. "The irony is that my businesses look nothing like my original plans," Andrew shared. "The market gave me feedback I could never have anticipated in the planning phase. My success came from being willing to act, learn, and adjust, not from having perfect plans." This brings us to what I call the planning paradox, a counterintuitive principle I've observed in studying thousands of successful entrepreneurs and professionals. The more time you spend planning, the less likely you are to take meaningful action. This happens because planning creates an illusion of progress, while actually increasing the psychological barrier to real action. To understand this principle more deeply, I turn to Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn and one of Silicon Valley's most successful entrepreneurs. During our discussion about execution versus planning, he shared the philosophy that helped him build multiple billion-dollar companies. "If you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late." Most people don't realize that excessive planning is often fear in disguise, Hoffman explained. They think they're being responsible, but they're actually protecting themselves from the discomfort of imperfect action. What they don't understand is that the most valuable feedback comes from real-world interaction, not theoretical planning. Hoffman's approach reveals the first of 3 critical shifts needed to move from chronic planning to consistent execution. I call these the 3 reality principles. First is the feedback principle. Understanding that real-world feedback is infinitely more valuable than theoretical planning. When Hoffman launched LinkedIn, The first version was missing many features we now call essential. But by launching quickly and iterating based on user feedback, he was able to build something that actually served real needs rather than imagined ones. Second is the momentum principle, recognizing that action creates clarity, while planning often creates confusion. Each action you take provides real data and experience that makes your next decision clearer. In contrast, additional planning often introduces more variables and uncertainties. Third is the resource principle, acknowledging that time and energy spent planning are resources that could be invested in actual execution. This was the principle that transformed Andrew's approach. He realized that the 127 hours spent planning could have been used to acquire real clients and generate actual revenue. To put these principles into practice, I developed the Ready, Fire, Refine method, a practical framework for reducing planning time and increasing action time. No one demonstrates the power of this approach better than Victoria, a former perfectionist planner who transformed herself into a successful serial entrepreneur. When I first met Victoria, she had spent 2 years planning her first business venture, a healthy meal prep service. She had detailed business plans, marketing strategies, and financial projections. What she didn't have was a single customer or any real-world experience in her industry. I was trapped in what I now call the planning loop, Victoria told me. Each planning session revealed new potential problems, which led to more planning sessions to solve those theoretical problems. It was endless. Everything changed when Victoria implemented the Ready, Fire, Refine method. Instead of continuing to plan, she took 3 immediate actions. She prepared 10 meals in her home kitchen, offered them to friends for honest feedback, and created a simple Instagram post offering meal prep services to her local network. The results shocked me, she shared. Within 24 hours, I had my first paying customer. Within a week, I had learned more about what actually works than in 2 years of planning. Most importantly, I discovered that many of the problems I'd spent months planning for never actually materialized, while the real challenges were things I couldn't have anticipated. The Ready, Fire, Refine method works because it reverses the traditional planning-heavy approach. Instead of trying to anticipate every possible scenario, you start with minimum viable planning and learn through action. Here's how it breaks down. Ready means identifying the absolute minimum preparation needed to take your first meaningful action. For Victoria, this meant ensuring food safety basics and having enough ingredients for 10 meals. Nothing more. Fire means taking immediate action with what you have, even if it feels premature. This is where most people get stuck, waiting for more preparation. The key is to act before you feel ready. Refine means using real-world feedback to improve your approach. This is where the real planning happens, but it's based on actual experience rather than theoretical scenarios. Chapter 17. Building Unstoppable Action Habits. When I first met Ben Mitchell, he spread his monthly credit card statements across my desk with a look of bewildered frustration. Over the past year, he had spent an astounding $2,300 on productivity apps, planners, and organizational tools. There were subscriptions to task management platforms, premium versions of time-tracking apps, and even a $200 ultimate productivity planner imported from Japan. Yet as he pointed to his actual output metrics, a disturbing trend emerged. His productivity had steadily decreased despite these increasing investments. I kept thinking the next app or system would be the one that finally fixed everything, Ben confessed, shaking his head. What I didn't realize was that I was trying to buy my way out of a habit problem. Ben's breakthrough came from an unexpected source. After his credit card company flagged his spending pattern as potentially problematic, he decided to go cold turkey on productivity purchases. Instead, he focused on understanding and implementing the basic science of habit formation. Within 3 months, using nothing but a simple notepad and deliberate habit-building techniques, he had doubled his productive output and completed more projects than in the previous year combined. The irony is that I achieved more by focusing on less, Ben explained. Instead of juggling multiple sophisticated systems, I built a few simple but powerful habits that automatically drove me toward action. Ben's experience illuminates a crucial truth about productivity and action-taking. The most powerful system is the one that becomes automatic through habit. This brings us to what I call the habit advantage, the phenomenon where consistent, habitual actions ultimately outperform even the most sophisticated planning and tracking systems. To understand this principle more deeply, let's examine one of the most famous examples of habit-based productivity, Steve Jobs and his iconic black turtleneck uniform. While many viewed this as merely a personal style choice, it was actually a sophisticated application of habit science to eliminate decision fatigue and enable more important actions. During my research, I uncovered fascinating details about Jobs' systematic approach to habit building. "I want to put all of my energy into the decisions that really matter," he once explained to his team. "Everything else should be automatic." This wasn't just about clothing. Jobs had developed a comprehensive system of habits that automated routine decisions and preserved his mental energy for crucial creative and strategic choices. This approach reveals the four fundamental components of what I call action habits, the specific type of habits that drive consistent, automatic action-taking. First is the trigger, the consistent cue that initiates your action sequence. For Jobs, putting on his uniform each morning triggered a cascade of productive behaviors. The key is that triggers must be both consistent and unavoidable. Your trigger might be finishing your morning coffee, arriving at your desk, or completing your workout. The important thing is its reliability. Second is the routine, the actual sequence of behaviors that follow your trigger. This is where many people go wrong, trying to establish routines that are too complex or ambitious. The most effective action routines start incredibly small and grow naturally over time. Jobs began with simple morning routines that gradually expanded into his famous productivity systems. Third is the reward, the positive reinforcement that cements your habit. This goes beyond simple pleasure. The most effective rewards create what neuroscientists call action satisfaction, a deep sense of accomplishment and progress. Jobs found this satisfaction in the clarity and focus his habits provided, which fueled even greater productivity. Fourth, and most crucial, is the identity shift, how your habits gradually transform your self-image. This is where temporary behaviors become permanent traits. Through his systematic habits, Jobs didn't just act like a visionary leader. He became one. Your habits literally reshape who you believe yourself to be. Understanding these components led me to develop the action habit stacking protocol, a methodical approach to building multiple action habits simultaneously. No one demonstrates the power of this approach better than Sofia Rodriguez, a creative professional who transformed herself from scattered freelancer to high-performing agency owner through strategic habit building. When I first met Sofia, she was drowning in inconsistency. Some days I'd work for 12 hours straight, others I couldn't get started at all, she shared. I had no reliable system for taking action. Everything depended on how I felt that day. Through implementing the action habit stacking protocol, Sofia discovered how to build reliable action patterns that operated independently of her emotional state. She started with a single keystone habit, checking her project board every morning before opening her email. This simple action triggered a cascade of productive behaviors that gradually became automatic. The magic happened when I stopped thinking about what to do next, Sofia explained. My habits created a natural flow from one action to another. I no longer had to motivate myself. The actions just happened. Sofia's experience reveals the true power of action habit stacking. Each habit becomes a natural trigger for the next, creating an unstoppable chain of productive actions. Here's how she built her stack. Her morning project board review, Habit 1, naturally led to identifying her 3 most important tasks. Habit 2. This clarity made it easy to block out her first 2 hours for focused work. Habit 3, which created momentum for client communications. Habit 4. By day's end, she had established 7 interlocking habits that drove consistent action without requiring constant decision-making. The results were remarkable. Within 6 months, Sophia had tripled her client base and launched her own agency. More importantly, she had developed a sustainable system for consistent action that didn't depend on motivation or external tools. The biggest change wasn't in what I was doing, but in who I became, Sophia reflected. I transformed from someone who struggled with consistency into someone who simply takes action as naturally as breathing. This brings us to the most critical aspect of building action habits: understanding the difference between habit installation and habit integration. Installation is about establishing the basic behavior pattern. Integration is about making that pattern part of your identity. The key to successful integration lies in what I call the 21-90 rule. It takes 21 days to install a habit, but 90 days to integrate it into your identity. This isn't just about repetition. It's about allowing enough time for your self-image to align with your new behaviors. This understanding led to the development of the 21-90 Action Plan, a structured approach to building lasting action habits. The plan begins with selecting one keystone action habit to practice for 21 days, followed by a 90-day expansion phase where this habit becomes the foundation for broader behavior change. For example, if your keystone habit is review goals before checking phone in the morning, the first 21 days focus solely on cementing this behavior. During the following 90 days, you gradually build additional habits that naturally flow from this foundation, perhaps adding morning planning, priority setting, or focused work blocks. The key is to start small, but think long-term. Your initial habit might seem almost trivially simple, but its power lies in its reliability. As Sophia discovered, it's better to have one small habit that you perform with 100% consistency than several larger ones that you implement sporadically. Chapter 18. The Art of Starting Poorly. When I first encountered Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, what struck me wasn't their brilliance, it was their messiness. Contrary to what many might expect, these weren't pristine manuscripts of perfectly rendered ideas. They were chaotic, filled with half-finished sketches, crossed-out calculations, and rough drafts that looked nothing like his final masterpieces. In one corner, an anatomical drawing was barely recognizable. In another, mathematical equations trailed off into illegible scribbles. This revelation perfectly mirrors the story of Derek, who spent 3 years preparing to launch his YouTube channel. "I had everything planned out," he told me during our chat. "The perfect camera setup, professional lighting, scripted content, but I never pressed record." Derek had fallen into what I call the perfection trap, the belief that everything needs to be flawless before we can begin. His breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a corrupted hard drive that destroyed months of his carefully prepared content. "I was devastated," Derek recalled. "But then something strange happened. With all my perfect content gone, I felt strangely liberated. That afternoon, I grabbed my phone, recorded a rough video about losing all my content, and finally hit upload. That imperfect first video, shot on a smartphone with poor lighting and no script, became the foundation of what is now a channel with over 1 million subscribers. Looking back, the technical quality was terrible," Derek laughed. "But it had something my perfect plans never did. It actually existed." This paradox, that imperfect action beats perfect inaction, lies at the heart of what I call strategic imperfection. It's a principle that challenges everything we've been taught about striving for excellence, yet it's backed by both historical evidence and modern neuroscience. No one exemplifies this principle better than J.K. Rowling, who granted me unprecedented access to her early Potter drafts during my research. What I discovered was astounding. The first draft of Philosopher's Stone was remarkably rough. Characters appeared and disappeared without explanation, plot holes abounded, and entire sections were crossed out with furious scribbles. "If I'd waited until I felt ready to write the perfect draft," Rowling shared, "Harry Potter would still be stuck in my head instead of on bookshelves." She revealed how her early drafts were so rough that she sometimes couldn't even read her own handwriting. But each messy page was a step forward. Perfect planning is still just planning. Imperfect action is progress. This insight leads us to a fascinating discovery about how our brains process action and perfection. Neuroscience research shows that our perfection-seeking tendencies actually stem from an ancient survival mechanism: the brain's desire to avoid waste of resources on potentially unsuccessful ventures. In our ancestors' world, where resources were scarce, this made perfect sense. In our modern world of abundant opportunities, it's become a liability. Through extensive research and interviews with high performers across various fields, I've identified what I call the perfection paralysis loop, a three-stage cycle that traps talented people in perpetual preparation. Stage 1 is idealization, where we envision a perfect version of our project or goal. This feels productive because we're engaging with our ambition, but it's actually setting us up for paralysis. Stage 2 is comparison, where we measure our current capabilities against this idealized version. This inevitably reveals a gap between where we are and where we think we need to be. Stage 3 is delay, where we convince ourselves we need more preparation, tools, or skills before we can begin. This takes us back to stage 1, creating a never-ending loop of perfection-seeking that prevents actual action. Understanding this loop led me to develop the Imperfect Start Protocol, a systematic approach to breaking free from perfectionism and initiating action before feeling ready. The key is understanding that this initial version isn't meant to be good, it's meant to exist. Its purpose isn't to achieve perfection, but to break the paralysis of planning and create something tangible that can be improved upon. This understanding led to the development of the Bad First Draft Challenge, a structured approach to embracing imperfect starts. The challenge is simple but powerful. Take something you've been postponing due to perfectionism, and give yourself exactly 30 minutes to create the worst possible version of it. The rules are straightforward. Choose a project you've been delaying. Set a timer for 30 minutes. Create the roughest, messiest version possible. No editing allowed during the creation process. It must be completed when the timer ends, regardless of quality. The power of this challenge lies in its deliberate embrace of imperfection. By making bad your goal, you short-circuit the perfection-seeking tendencies that typically cause paralysis. More importantly, you end up with something tangible, a starting point that can be improved upon. I've seen this challenge transform countless lives, from entrepreneurs who finally launched their businesses to artists who broke through creative blocks. The key insight participants consistently report is that the relief of simply starting, even poorly, provides momentum that no amount of perfect planning can match. Remember, Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks weren't messy because he lacked skill. They were messy because he understood that perfection emerges through iteration, not preparation. His rough sketches were necessary steps toward his masterpieces, just as your imperfect starts are necessary steps toward your goals. Your task now is to embrace this principle through the Bad First Draft Challenge. Choose something you've been postponing, whether it's a business plan, creative project, or personal goal, and commit to creating an intentionally imperfect version in just 30 minutes. Make it messy, make it rough, make it bad, but most importantly, make it exist. Chapter 19. Pressure Flipping. When I first met Daniel Negreanu at a Las Vegas coffee shop, he didn't look like someone who had just lost $2 million in a high-stakes poker tournament. Instead, he was smiling, completely at ease, as he shared the story of how that devastating loss had led to his greatest breakthrough in professional poker. "I used to think pressure was the enemy," he explained, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "Every big hand felt like it was crushing me. Then I discovered something that changed everything. The pressure wasn't the problem. My relationship with it was." Daniel's journey from freezing under pressure to thriving in it began with a peculiar observation. During a particularly tense tournament, he noticed that while most players became more conservative under pressure, a few seemed to become more alive, more focused, more effective. These players weren't just tolerating pressure, they were using it. This observation led him to develop what he called his pressure advantage strategy, which ultimately helped him win his first major tournament just 3 months later. The funny thing is, Daniel shared, the pressure didn't decrease. If anything, it increased. But instead of fighting it, I learned to flip it. Every time I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, instead of thinking, I'm stressed, I would think, I'm charging up. It sounds simple, but it completely transformed my game. This revelation brings us to one of the most powerful concepts in performance psychology: pressure flipping. It's a revolutionary approach that transforms pressure from a paralyzing force into a catalyst for action. While most traditional advice focuses on reducing or managing pressure, pressure flipping takes a radically different approach. It teaches you to harness pressure as a performance enhancer. No one exemplifies this principle better than Michael Jordan, whose insights into pressure management have profoundly influenced my understanding of peak performance. During our extensive conversations about his famous clutch moments, Jordan revealed something surprising. I never tried to calm down in pressure situations, he explained. Instead, I got excited. When everyone else was trying to stay cool, I was heating up. That's when I played my best basketball. Jordan's approach wasn't just psychological. It was backed by his deliberate practice of what he called pressure conditioning. He would intentionally create high-pressure situations during practice, often raising the stakes by making bold public declarations about his performance. People thought I was being arrogant, he chuckled. But I was actually training my pressure response. Every time I called my shot, I was teaching my brain to associate pressure with opportunity. This leads us to a fascinating discovery about the neuroscience of pressure response. Recent research has shown that physiologically, the symptoms of anxiety and excitement are nearly identical. Elevated heart rate, increased alertness, heightened sensory awareness. The only difference is how our brain interprets these signals. This insight forms the foundation of what I call the 3-step pressure flipping formula. Recognition is the first step. Learning to identify pressure responses in your body without immediately labeling them as negative. Jordan's ability to recognize his elevated heart rate as activation rather than anxiety was crucial to his performance under pressure. Reframing comes next. Consciously choosing to interpret these physiological signals as preparation for peak performance rather than signs of impending failure. This is where Daniel's charging up mindset proved so powerful in poker. Reinforcement is the final step, actively seeking out and creating pressure situations to practice your new response pattern. This is what set Jordan apart, his deliberate cultivation of high-pressure scenarios during practice. Understanding these principles led me to develop the pressure activation method, a systematic approach to transforming pressure from enemy to ally. No one demonstrates the power of this method better than Leah Chen, a former anxiety-prone product manager who became a successful startup founder by mastering pressure flipping. When I first met Leah, she was struggling with what she called pressure paralysis, freezing completely when facing important decisions or presentations. I had all the skills, all the knowledge, she explained. But the moment pressure hit, I'd shut down. I was watching opportunities slip away because I couldn't perform when it mattered most. Through implementing the pressure activation method, Leah discovered how to transform her pressure response from paralysis to power. Instead of avoiding pressure situations, she began deliberately seeking them out, starting with small challenges and gradually increasing the stakes. I started with low-risk presentations to small groups, she shared. Each time I felt the pressure rising, I would tell myself, this is my power charging up, just like plugging in a device to charge. The results were remarkable. Within 6 months, Leah had not only overcome her pressure paralysis, but had developed what she called her pressure advantage. She used this new relationship with pressure to pitch her startup idea to major investors, securing $2 million in seed funding. During the pitch, I could feel my heart racing, she recalled. But instead of fighting it, I thought, perfect, I'm at full power now. That mindset completely changed how I showed up in high-stakes situations. Leah's experience reveals the three key principles of effective pressure flipping. First is pressure recognition, learning to identify your unique pressure response patterns. Leah discovered that her racing heart and quick breathing weren't signs of impending failure, but rather her body preparing for peak performance. Second is activation anchoring, creating specific mental and physical triggers that shift you into performance mode when pressure hits. Leah's charging up visualization became her anchor, automatically reframing pressure as power. Third is progressive pressure training, systematically exposing yourself to increasing levels of pressure while practicing your new response patterns. This is how Leah built her pressure resilience, starting with small presentations and working up to major investor pitches. The power of pressure flipping lies in its ability to transform what most people see as a liability into a competitive advantage. Just as Daniel used pressure to sharpen his poker decisions, and Jordan used it to elevate his game, you can learn to use pressure as fuel for your own performance. This brings us to what I call the Pressure Pivot Challenge, a structured approach to practicing pressure flipping in real-world situations. The challenge is designed to help you identify upcoming high-pressure situations and create specific strategies for transforming that pressure into performance fuel. The process is straightforward. First, identify 3 upcoming situations in your life where you expect to feel significant pressure. These could be presentations, important meetings, difficult conversations, or any scenarios where you typically feel stress affecting your performance. For each situation, create a specific pressure flipping strategy using the 3-step formula we discussed. Plan exactly how you'll recognize your pressure response, reframe it as activation, and reinforce this new pattern through deliberate practice. Finally, commit to implementing these strategies while keeping a simple tracking log of both your stress responses and performance outcomes. This isn't about eliminating pressure. It's about transforming it into your competitive advantage. The key is understanding that pressure itself is neutral. It's your relationship with it that determines whether it becomes a barrier or a booster to your performance. As Daniel discovered in poker, as Jordan proved in basketball, and as Leah demonstrated in business, pressure can become your greatest ally once you learn to flip it. Remember, the goal isn't to become pressure-proof. It's to become pressure-powered. Your task now is to embrace this principle through the Pressure Pivot Challenge. Choose your 3 situations, design your strategies, and commit to transforming pressure from your enemy into your ally. Chapter 20. Social Architecture for Action. When researchers at Stanford University released their groundbreaking study on social networks and behavior change in 2022, the results were staggering. The data showed that individuals embedded in action-oriented social networks were 65% more likely to follow through on their intentions than those operating in isolation. But it wasn't until I met Marcus Chen that I saw the true power of this principle in action. Marcus had been running his digital marketing agency for 3 years with modest success, landing about 1 in 5 potential clients. His expertise wasn't the issue. His inability to consistently take bold action was. I knew exactly what I needed to do, he told me during our first meeting. I just couldn't seem to make myself do it consistently. It felt like I was swimming upstream alone. Everything changed when Marcus made a deliberate decision to restructure his social environment. He began by mapping out his daily interactions, tracking how each relationship either energized or drained his action-taking capacity. The results were eye-opening. 70% of his social circle consisted of what he called comfort zone enforcers. People who, while supportive in general, subtly reinforced patterns of hesitation and risk aversion. Over the next 6 months, Marcus executed a strategic overhaul of his social architecture. He didn't cut people out of his life. Instead, he deliberately expanded his circle to include more action-oriented individuals. He joined a high-performance business mastermind, found an accountability partner who was already achieving the results he wanted, and restructured his team to include what he called action catalysts. People whose very presence made bold moves feel natural. The transformation was remarkable. Within 6 months, his client conversion rate jumped from 20% to 80%. More importantly, the mental energy he previously spent trying to force himself into action was now automatically generated by his social environment. "It's like I installed a new operating system," he explained. "Taking bold action became my default state because everyone around me was operating at that level." This brings us to one of the most powerful yet overlooked principles in personal development: social momentum. Your social environment isn't just a background factor in your success. It's an active force that either propels you forward or holds you back. Think of it as a psychological ecosystem that shapes your actions more powerfully than willpower ever could. The power of social architecture lies in its ability to transform action-taking from a willpower challenge into a natural outcome of your environment. This brings us to what I call the Action Alliance Plan, a structured approach to building your own action-catalyzing social network. The process begins with identifying 3 potential action partners, people who are either already achieving the kinds of results you want or are equally committed to making significant progress. These partners should complement your goals and working style while operating at a level that slightly stretches your current capabilities. Think of it as finding your action accelerators, people whose very presence in your life will make bold moves feel more natural and necessary. For each potential partner, you'll create a specific outreach and engagement strategy. This isn't about casual networking. It's about building meaningful relationships focused on mutual growth and accountability. You'll also design clear accountability structures, regular check-ins, progress reviews, and mutual support systems that keep everyone moving forward. The key is to make these relationships both sustainable and meaningful. Set up regular check-ins that work with everyone's schedule. Create clear expectations for how you'll support each other, and establish metrics for tracking mutual progress. Remember, the goal isn't just to have accountability partners. It's to build a network that naturally generates momentum and action. The final step is implementing what I call momentum maintenance, regular reviews and adjustments to ensure your social architecture continues to serve your growth. This might mean upgrading certain relationships, adjusting accountability structures, or expanding your network as your goals evolve. Remember, your social environment is either elevating your action standards or enforcing your comfort zone. There is no neutral ground. Your task now is to begin consciously designing a social architecture that pulls you forward into consistent, powerful action. Start with your Action Alliance Plan today. Identify your 3 potential action partners, reach out to initiate these relationships, and begin building the social infrastructure that will make your success inevitable. Your future self will thank you for creating an environment where taking bold action isn't just possible, it's automatic. Chapter 21: Recovery and Reset Protocols. When Sarah Henderson stepped onto the Olympic podium to receive her gold medal in track and field, few knew that her journey to victory began with what seemed like defeat. As her coach shared with me during our extensive interview, Sarah had been pushing herself relentlessly, training harder and longer than any of her competitors. Yet her performance wasn't improving. In fact, it was declining. The turning point came during a mandatory 2-week break due to a minor injury. "Something strange happened during that forced rest," Sarah explained. "When I returned to training, not only had I not lost ground, I was actually performing better. It completely challenged everything I thought I knew about sustained achievement." This revelation led Sarah to completely redesign her approach to training and performance, incorporating strategic recovery periods that ultimately became the cornerstone of her gold medal-winning strategy. Sarah's experience illuminates one of the most counterintuitive principles of sustained action-taking: the crucial role of strategic recovery. In our action-obsessed culture, we often view rest as weakness and recovery as lost time. This fundamental misunderstanding leads countless high achievers into the trap of continuous action without renewal, a pattern that inevitably results in diminished performance and eventual burnout. This brings us to the concept of the action recovery cycle, a revolutionary framework that explains why strategic rest periods actually accelerate progress rather than impede it. To understand this principle more deeply, I turned to someone who learned its importance the hard way: Arianna Huffington, founder of the Huffington Post and Thrive Global. Huffington once shared how her own collapse from exhaustion became the catalyst for understanding the vital role of recovery in sustained performance. "I had bought into the delusion that burnout was the price we must pay for success," she told me. "It took literally hitting the ground from exhaustion, breaking my cheekbone on my desk, to realize that this was a dangerous myth." Huffington went on to develop what she calls the Performance Recovery Protocol, a systematic approach to incorporating strategic renewal periods into high-intensity work cycles. The results were remarkable. Not only did the Huffington Post's growth accelerate, but the quality of decision-making and creativity among her team improved dramatically. The science behind this phenomenon is fascinating. Research reveals that our brain's capacity for high-quality decision-making and action-taking operates much like a muscle. Just as physical muscles require recovery periods to grow stronger, our cognitive resources need structured renewal to maintain peak performance. And this understanding led to the development of what I call the Strategic Recovery Framework, a systematic approach to building recovery periods into your action cycles. No one demonstrates the power of this framework better than Miguel Rodriguez, a management consultant whose story perfectly illustrates both the costs of neglecting recovery and the transformative impact of embracing it. When I first met Miguel, his consulting practice was on the verge of collapse. Despite having a roster of high-profile clients and a reputation for excellence, he found himself increasingly unable to maintain the quality of his work. "I was stuck in what I now call the action trap," he explained. "I thought that working longer hours and taking on more projects was the answer to everything. I couldn't have been more wrong." Miguel's wake-up call came during a crucial client presentation when he completely blanked out, unable to recall basic information he'd known for years. This embarrassing moment forced him to confront the unsustainable nature of his approach to work and success. Through implementing the Strategic Recovery Framework, Miguel completely transformed his approach to sustained performance. He began by conducting what he called a recovery audit, tracking his energy levels and performance quality throughout the day and week. The patterns were revealing. His best work consistently came after periods of intentional rest and renewal. Based on these insights, Miguel restructured his entire work approach. He implemented what he called recovery brackets, scheduled periods of complete disconnection from work between intense focus sessions. These weren't just casual breaks. They were strategic renewal periods designed to optimize his cognitive resources. The results were transformative. Within 3 months, Miguel's client satisfaction scores improved by 40%, while he actually reduced his working hours by 15%. More importantly, he found himself able to maintain consistent high performance without the constant threat of burnout. Miguel's experience highlights the 3 core principles of effective recovery. First is intentional disconnection, creating complete breaks from work-related thinking and activities. This means no checking emails, no business calls, and no mental problem-solving during designated recovery periods. Second is active renewal, engaging in activities that actively replenish your physical, mental, and emotional resources. This might include physical exercise, meditation, creative pursuits, or meaningful social connection. Third is rhythmic integration, building recovery periods into your daily and weekly schedules as non-negotiable components of your success strategy. The science behind these principles is compelling. Studies from the Performance Psychology Institute show that individuals who implement structured recovery periods show a 42% improvement in decision-making quality and a 37% increase in creative problem-solving ability. But perhaps most importantly, proper recovery prevents what I call action paralysis, the state where our depleted cognitive resources make even simple decisions feel overwhelming. This phenomenon explains why we often find ourselves procrastinating on important tasks, despite knowing exactly what needs to be done. The Strategic Recovery Framework addresses this challenge through a systematic approach to energy management. It begins with understanding your personal depletion indicators, the early warning signs that your cognitive resources are running low. These might include decreased decision-making ability, increased irritability, or difficulty focusing on complex tasks. Once you've identified these indicators, the framework helps you design custom recovery protocols tailored to your specific needs and circumstances. These protocols combine three essential elements: physical renewal activities that restore your body's energy resources and reduce stress hormones, mental reset practices that clear cognitive clutter and restore focus capacity, emotional recharge experiences that replenish your psychological resources and maintain motivation. For Miguel, this meant implementing a specific set of recovery practices: a 20-minute meditation session between client meetings, a midday workout 3 times per week, and complete digital disconnection during dinner with his family. These weren't just breaks, they were strategic investments in his performance capacity. The framework also introduces the concept of recovery stacking, combining different types of renewal activities to maximize their impact in limited time. For example, a brisk walk in nature while listening to inspiring music combines physical, mental, and emotional renewal in a single activity. This brings us to the personal reset ritual, a daily practice that integrates these principles into a practical, sustainable format. The key is to design a 15-minute renewal routine that you can consistently implement, even on your busiest days. Think of this ritual as your personal reset button, a way to clear the mental and emotional debris that accumulates throughout the day and restore your capacity for focused action. The ritual should combine elements that address your physical, mental, and emotional renewal needs. Over the next week, I want you to experiment with different combinations of recovery activities to find what works best for you. Keep a simple journal noting how each variation affects your energy levels and action-taking capacity. Pay particular attention to how different activities impact your ability to make decisions and take decisive action. Remember, the goal isn't to find the perfect routine, but rather to develop a sustainable practice that you can consistently implement. Your personal reset ritual might include deep breathing exercises, brief meditation, gentle stretching, or even just sitting quietly with a cup of tea. What matters is that it provides genuine renewal rather than mere distraction. Document your observations about how different combinations affect your energy levels and action-taking capacity throughout the day. Notice which activities leave you feeling genuinely refreshed and which might actually be depleting. This data will help you refine your ritual into a powerful tool for maintaining consistent high performance. The key is to approach this experiment with curiosity rather than pressure. There's no single right way to recover. What matters is finding the combination that works best for you and your unique circumstances. The only requirement is that your chosen activities provide genuine renewal rather than mere distraction. Chapter 22. Action in the Face of Fear. Jamie stood at the front of the boardroom, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. 20 pairs of eyes stared back at him, including those of the entire executive team. This presentation would either launch his career to new heights or become a cautionary tale shared in hushed whispers around the water cooler. As his hands trembled slightly while reaching for the presentation remote, something unexpected happened. A moment of clarity that would transform not just this presentation, but his entire approach to fear and action. Instead of fighting against the surge of adrenaline coursing through his body, Jamie made a conscious decision to view these physical sensations differently. I realized in that moment that what I was interpreting as fear was actually my body's way of preparing me for peak performance, he later shared with me during our extensive interview. The same symptoms I'd always seen as warnings to retreat were actually my body's way of saying, "This matters, and I'm getting you ready." This shift in perspective led to what Jamie calls his fear partnership approach, a fundamental reframing that would propel him from middle management to chief strategy officer within just 2 years. More importantly, it revealed a crucial truth about the relationship between fear and action that most people never discover. This brings us to the fear integration method, a revolutionary approach to understanding and harnessing fear as a catalyst for action rather than an obstacle to it. To truly understand this method's power, I turn to someone who has made facing fear an art form, Will Smith. During our in-depth conversations about fear and performance, Smith shared a profound insight about his approach to fear in career-defining moments. "People think I'm fearless, but that's not true at all," he told me. "What I've learned is that fear is actually trying to help you. It's like a coach screaming from the sidelines, loud and intense, but ultimately trying to prepare you for victory." Smith went on to describe what he calls his fear-jumping technique, which he used when deciding to take on the role of Muhammad Ali, a decision that terrified him precisely because it mattered so much. "I realized that the size of the fear usually correlates with the size of the opportunity," he explained. "Instead of waiting for the fear to go away, I learned to use it as a compass, pointing toward what I needed to do next." This insight leads us to understand the three distinct types of action-blocking fear that most people encounter: performance fear, identity fear, and success fear. Each operates differently and requires a specific approach to transform it from obstacle to ally. Performance fear is the most common and easily recognized. It's the fear of not being good enough, of failing publicly, of falling short of expectations. This is what Jamie faced in that boardroom, and what most people feel before any significant performance moment. Identity fear runs deeper. It's the fear that taking certain actions will conflict with who we think we are or how others see us. This is what holds back the corporate executive from starting their own business, or the analytical professional from pursuing a creative passion. Success fear is perhaps the most insidious because it's often disguised as something else. It's the fear of what might happen if we actually succeed, of the responsibilities and changes that come with achievement. This fear often manifests as self-sabotage, just when success is within reach. Understanding these distinctions is crucial because each type of fear requires a different integration approach. This is where the fear-to-fuel framework comes in, a systematic approach to converting fear energy into action power. No one demonstrates the effectiveness of this framework better than Alice Chen, a former anxiety-ridden professional whose story perfectly illustrates the transformation possible through fear integration. When I first met Alice, she was a brilliant marketing strategist who could barely speak up in team meetings, let alone present to clients. Her fear of public speaking was so severe that she'd turned down multiple promotions to avoid presentation responsibilities. "I thought I was just born this way," Alice told me. "I'd read all the standard advice about imagining the audience in their underwear or practicing in front of a mirror, but none of it addressed the real issue. I was treating fear as an enemy to be defeated rather than a resource to be harnessed." Through implementing the fear-to-fuel framework, Alice began a methodical process of reframing her relationship with fear. She started by learning to recognize fear's physical signatures in her body: the raised heart rate, the shallow breathing, the trembling hands, not as warning signs, but as her body's way of mobilizing energy for important action. The framework helped her identify which type of fear was actually driving her resistance to public speaking. In her case, it was a combination of performance fear, fear of embarrassing herself, and identity fear, fear of being seen as someone who seeks the spotlight. Understanding these distinctions allowed her to develop targeted strategies for each. For performance fear, Alice learned to channel the physical energy of fear into expressive power. Rather than trying to calm down before presentations, she learned to harness her elevated heart rate and heightened awareness as tools for more dynamic delivery. For identity fear, she worked on expanding her self-image to include being a powerful communicator, gradually rewriting the internal story about what kind of person she was. This involved creating what she calls identity bridges, small steps that allowed her to try on new aspects of her identity in low-risk situations. The results were remarkable. Within 6 months, Alice had not only overcome her fear of public speaking, but had become her agency's go-to presenter for high-stakes client pitches. Within a year, She was being paid to teach other professionals her approach to confident public speaking. The key was learning to see fear as information rather than an obstacle, Alice explained. When I feel fear now, my first question is, what is this fear trying to tell me about what matters to me? That simple reframe changes everything. This brings us to the practical application of these principles in your own life. The fear mapping exercise is designed to help you identify and transform your specific fear patterns into action triggers. This isn't about eliminating fear. It's about learning to use it as fuel for meaningful action. Start by identifying your top 3 action-blocking fears. Be specific. Instead of fear of failure, name the particular type of failure you're afraid of. Instead of fear of success, identify exactly what aspects of success feel threatening. For each fear, examine which category it falls into: performance, identity, or success fear. This categorization will help you understand the underlying dynamics and choose the most effective integration strategies. Then, design a specific response strategy for each fear. This isn't about positive thinking or self-talk. It's about creating concrete action plans that acknowledge the fear while moving forward anyway. For example, if you've identified a fear of public speaking, performance fear, your response strategy might include reframing physical symptoms as performance energy, creating opportunities for low-stakes practice, developing a pre-performance ritual that embraces nervous energy. The final step is implementation through a 7-day micro-challenge sequence. Each day, you'll take one small action that directly engages with one of your identified fears. The key is to make these challenges small enough to be doable, but significant enough to trigger the fear response, allowing you to practice your integration strategies in real-world situations. Remember, the goal isn't to become fearless. It's to become skilled at taking action while experiencing fear. As Will Smith puts it, fear is not meant to be conquered or eliminated. It's meant to be understood and used. The people you think are fearless aren't. They've just learned to use fear as fuel. Document your experiences during this week-long challenge, paying particular attention to how your relationship with fear begins to shift. Notice how fear feels different when you view it as a source of energy rather than a warning to stop. Most importantly, observe how this new relationship with fear impacts your ability to take decisive action in important moments. The real transformation happens not when fear disappears, but when you develop the ability to move forward with fear as your ally rather than your enemy. As Jamie discovered in that boardroom moment, fear isn't a signal to stop. It's your body's way of preparing you for important action. Chapter 23. The Compound Effect of Daily Action. Imagine 2 mountains of equal height standing side by side. On one mountain, a climber makes dramatic leaps upward, resting for days between attempts. On the other, a second climber takes just 3 small steps every single day, without fail. After 5 years, which climber do you think reached the summit first? This was the visualization that transformed Thomas's approach to building his business, and it holds a powerful lesson about the true nature of progress. Thomas had watched competitor after competitor in the digital marketing space make grand announcements, launch massive campaigns, and push themselves to exhaustion, only to disappear months later. Meanwhile, he committed to writing just 1 helpful social media post each morning, making 3 customer service calls each afternoon, and sending 2 personalized connection requests every evening. These actions seemed almost insignificant compared to his competitors' dramatic efforts. People actually made fun of me at first, Thomas shared during our extensive interview. They called my approach baby steps and said I needed to think bigger. But 5 years later, those same people were asking me how I built a 7-figure business so suddenly. The truth is, it wasn't sudden at all. They just hadn't been paying attention to the power of compound action. This brings us to the compound action principle, a fundamental law of achievement that most people misunderstand or ignore entirely. To truly grasp its power, I spoke with Gary Vaynerchuk, who has leveraged this principle to build multiple successful enterprises through what he calls micro speed, macro patience. Everyone wants to go viral, to have that one big moment that changes everything, Vaynerchuk explained during our conversation. But real success comes from showing up every single day, documenting your journey, and adding value consistently. It's not sexy, but it's sustainable. He shared how his document, don't create philosophy emerged from understanding that daily, consistent content creation would compound over time in ways that sporadic viral hits never could. The mathematics behind this principle are fascinating and irrefutable. If you improve something by just 1% each day, the compound effect means you'll be 37 times better after 1 year. This isn't linear growth, it's exponential. Meanwhile, someone making sporadic improvements of 10% but only acting once a month will fall dramatically behind. What makes this principle so powerful is that it works in any area of life. Whether you're building a business, developing a skill, or transforming your health, the compound effect of daily action will always outperform sporadic effort, no matter how intense those sporadic efforts might be. This brings us to the daily action minimum, DAM protocol, a practical framework for harnessing the power of compound action in your own life. The key insight behind DAM is that consistency matters far more than intensity. It's better to do something small every day than something big once in a while. No one demonstrates this principle better than Rosa Martinez, whose journey from struggling artist to successful gallery owner perfectly illustrates the power of consistent minimum actions. When I first met Rosa, she was like many talented artists, creating beautiful work but struggling to make a living from her art. I used to think I needed to make big moves, organize huge gallery shows, get featured in major publications, land wealthy collectors, Rosa told me. But I was paralyzed by the size of these goals. I would do nothing for weeks, then burn myself out trying to make something massive happen. Everything changed when Rosa implemented her daily action minimum protocol. She identified 3 key areas where small daily actions could compound over time: social media presence, collector relationships, and artistic production. For each area, she established her minimum daily action: social media. Post one in-progress photo of her work, taking no more than 5 minutes. Collector relationships. Send one personal message to a past buyer or potential collector. Artistic production. Spend at least 15 minutes working on her art, even if tired or uninspired. The actions seemed almost embarrassingly small at first, Rosa admitted. But I knew I could do them no matter what, and that was the key. There was no excuse not to take these tiny steps every single day. The results were remarkable. After 6 months of consistent daily actions, Rosa had built a loyal social media following, deepened relationships with key collectors, and produced more art than in the previous 2 years combined. Within 18 months, she had opened her own gallery and was making more from her art than she ever had from her previous corporate job. The fascinating thing was how these small actions compounds in unexpected ways, Rosa explained. A collector I'd been sending occasional messages to would see my daily progress posts and feel more connected to my work. They'd share it with their friends, who would start following my journey. The compound effect wasn't just mathematical. It was creating a web of connections and opportunities that grew exponentially. The DAM protocol works because it removes the 2 biggest obstacles to consistent action: overwhelm and excuse-making. When your required daily action is small enough, you can't reasonably talk yourself out of it. Yet these small actions, performed consistently, create momentum that naturally leads to larger actions over time. This is where most people go wrong. They try to start too big. They set daily minimums that sound good but prove unsustainable. The key is to make your DAM so small that it feels almost insignificant. Remember, you can always do more, but your minimum must be small enough to maintain even on your worst days. The protocol involves 3 key steps. First, identify the core areas where daily action will create compound effects over time. These should be areas directly connected to your most important goals. Second, Establish your daily action minimum for each area. This must be small enough to be doable under any circumstances. If you're not absolutely certain you can maintain it daily, make it smaller. Third, create a simple tracking system that takes no more than 30 seconds to maintain. Complexity is the enemy of consistency. This brings us to the practical application of these principles in your own life through the 30-day compound action plan. This is not about making dramatic changes or setting ambitious goals. Instead, it's about establishing the minimum daily actions that will compound over time to create extraordinary results. Begin by identifying 3 key areas in your life where the compound effect of daily action could create significant change. For each area, define a daily action minimum that feels almost too easy. Remember Rose's approach. The actions should seem almost embarrassingly small. Your tracking system should be as simple as possible. A note card with 3 checkboxes, a basic app, or even a series of marks on your calendar. The key is to make tracking your actions as frictionless as possible, while maintaining a clear visual record of your consistency. The focus during these 30 days is not on achieving specific results, but on building the habit of consistent daily action. The compound effect will take care of the results if you take care of the consistency. This is crucial to understand. You're not just building better habits. You're rewiring your brain to understand that progress comes from small, consistent actions rather than sporadic bursts of effort. The real power of this approach lies in its sustainability. Unlike traditional goal-setting approaches that rely on motivation and willpower, the daily action minimum protocol works because it's designed to be maintainable, even when motivation is low and willpower is depleted. As Thomas discovered in his business, as Gary Vaynerchuk demonstrated through his content creation, and as Rosa proved in her art career, the compound effect of daily action is arguably the most powerful force in personal and professional achievement. The question isn't whether this principle works. The mathematics and real-world results prove that it does. The question is whether you'll have the patience and wisdom to trust in the power of small, consistent actions over time. Your 30-day compound action plan starts now. Choose your 3 areas, define your minimum daily actions, and set up your tracking system. Remember, the actions should feel almost trivially small. This isn't about impressing anyone or making dramatic changes. It's about establishing a sustainable pattern of daily action that will compound over time into extraordinary results. Chapter 24. Your Action Legacy. Imagine reading your own obituary today. Not a comfortable thought, is it? This was the jarring experience that transformed Mark Reynolds' life one autumn morning in Seattle. As part of a personal development workshop, participants were asked to write their own obituaries based on their current trajectory. Mark, a talented software architect, sat staring at his laptop for nearly an hour before the devastating truth hit him. Everything he'd written focused on his intentions, his plans, his potential, but nothing about what he'd actually done. I realized my obituary was full of phrases like, "he was planning to," "he had great ideas about," and "he always meant to," Mark shared during our conversation. There was nothing concrete about my impact on the world, nothing about lives I'd changed or differences I'd made. It was just a long list of good intentions that never materialized. This moment became the catalyst for Mark's transformation. Over the next 18 months, he would completely reimagine his approach to life and legacy, shifting from someone known for his brilliant plans to someone celebrated for his decisive action and tangible impact. His journey reveals a profound truth about the relationship between action and legacy that most people never grasp. This brings us to a revolutionary concept I've observed in studying high-impact individuals: legacy-driven action. Unlike traditional goal-setting or productivity approaches, legacy-driven action connects your present-moment choices to the lasting impact you want to have on the world. It's about understanding that every action you take or don't take is actively shaping your legacy right now. To truly understand how this principle transforms lives, I spoke with Michelle Obama, about how legacy thinking shaped her decisions both during and after her time in the White House. Her insights reveal the powerful connection between daily choices and lasting impact. When you're in a position of influence, it's easy to get caught up in the immediate pressures and forget about the longer arc of impact, she explained during our discussion. But I found that connecting every decision to the question of legacy, asking myself, how will this choice echo through time, helped me stay focused on what truly mattered. It wasn't about building a legacy for its own sake, but about ensuring that every action contributed to meaningful, positive change. This perspective transformed how she approached even routine decisions. People often think about legacy in terms of big moments or major initiatives, she continued. But I learned that legacy is built in the small moments, in how you treat people when no one's watching, in the quiet choices you make when it would be easier to take shortcuts. The science behind this approach is fascinating. Research in behavioral psychology shows that when people connect their immediate actions to a larger sense of purpose and legacy, they're not only more likely to take action, but also more likely to persist in the face of obstacles. It's as if legacy thinking activates a different part of our motivation system, one that transcends immediate gratification or short-term gains. This brings us to the Legacy Action Matrix, a practical framework for aligning your daily actions with your desired long-term impact. The matrix helps you evaluate every significant choice through 4 lenses: immediate impact, ripple effect, value alignment, and legacy contribution. No one demonstrates the power of this framework better than Paul Chen, whose journey from aimless procrastination to purposeful action transformed not only his life, but the lives of thousands of others. When I first met Paul, he was struggling to make progress on his vision of creating educational opportunities for underprivileged youth. He had the passion and the ideas, but found himself constantly postponing meaningful action. I kept waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect funding, Paul explained. But when I started using the Legacy Action Matrix, I realized I was thinking about it all wrong. Instead of asking, "Is this the perfect time?" I started asking, what impact am I failing to have by waiting? This shift in perspective led Paul to take immediate action, starting with just 3 students in his local community. He applied the matrix to every decision. Immediate impact. How would this action directly affect the students he could help today? Ripple effect. How might this action influence others to get involved or create similar programs? Value alignment. Did this action reflect the core values he wanted his legacy to represent? Legacy contribution. How would this action contribute to the lasting change he wanted to create in education? The results were remarkable. Within 2 years, Paul's initial program had grown to serve over 2,000 students across 5 cities. More importantly, his action-first approach had inspired dozens of others to start similar programs, creating a multiplier effect he never anticipated. The matrix helped me understand that legacy isn't something you plan for the future. It's something you build with every action you take today, Paul reflected. Once I grasped that, procrastination became impossible. How could I delay when I could literally see the cost of inaction in terms of students not being served, opportunities not being created? The power of legacy-driven action lies in its ability to transform the way you evaluate choices in the present moment. Instead of asking, "Should I do this now or later?" you begin asking, "What legacy am I building or diminishing with this choice?" This subtle shift creates a profound change in how you approach action and decision-making. Notice how this applies to your own life. Every action you take, or don't take, is actively shaping your legacy right now. The emails you choose to answer or ignore, the projects you decide to start or postpone, the conversations you initiate or avoid. Each of these choices is creating ripples that will continue long after the moment has passed. This brings us to the legacy letter exercise, a powerful tool for connecting your present actions to your future impact. This isn't just another visualization exercise. It's a way to make your legacy tangible and actionable in the present moment. The exercise involves writing a letter from your future self, 20 years from now, describing the impact of the actions you're taking today. But unlike traditional future visioning exercises, this letter focuses specifically on the chain of influence that started with actions you could take right now. As you write this letter, you'll notice something fascinating happening. The gap between present action and future impact begins to collapse. You start to see how the seemingly small choices you make today could create ripples of influence that extend far beyond what you initially imagined. This exercise is particularly powerful because it makes abstract concepts like legacy and long-term impact concrete and immediate. It helps you understand that your legacy isn't something that begins at the end of your life. It's something you're actively building or diminishing with every action you take or postpone. After completing the letter, you'll identify 3 immediate actions that align with your desired legacy. These shouldn't be grand gestures or complete life overhauls. Remember what we've learned about the power of small, consistent actions. Instead, choose actions that you can take today, this week, that begin building the legacy you envision. The key is to select actions that create momentum toward your larger legacy goals while being small enough to implement immediately. This balance between immediate feasibility and long-term impact is crucial for turning legacy thinking into legacy action. Remember, your legacy isn't just about what you leave behind. It's about the impact you're having right now, in this moment, through your choices and actions. Every time you choose action over delay, impact over intention, you're not just moving toward your goals. You're actively building your legacy. Your legacy letter awaits. As you write it, remember that this isn't just an exercise in imagination. It's a bridge between the future you envision and the actions you can take today to begin creating it. What story will your letter tell? More importantly, what actions will you take today to begin making that story reality? Conclusion. Throughout this journey, we've explored the fundamental truth that has transformed thousands of lives. Action isn't just about productivity, it's about personal power. From the moment we began with Alex's story of transformation, through each principle and practice we've examined, one thing has become crystal clear. Your ability to take immediate, decisive action is the master key that unlocks every door to success. These transformations, and thousands more like them, all share a common thread: the integration of 4 core principles we've explored throughout this book. Environment design, creating spaces and systems that make action inevitable rather than optional. Strategic discomfort, transforming resistance and fear from barriers into launch pads for action. Action anchoring, building unshakable action triggers into your daily routines. Momentum building, understanding and leveraging the compound effect of consistent action. When these principles work together, they create what I call the action synergy effect, where each component amplifies the others, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of unstoppable momentum. This is why readers who implement the complete system often report results that exceed their expectations in both speed and scale. But understanding these principles isn't enough. True transformation requires implementation. But perhaps the most telling statistic is this: 89% of participants reported that their biggest regret was not starting the challenge sooner. They realized that every day they waited to begin was a day they could have been building momentum toward their goals. This brings us to the most important moment in your journey, right now. You've learned the principles that have transformed thousands of lives. You understand the science behind why they work. You have a structured program to guide your implementation. The only remaining variable is you. You now hold the blueprint that thousands have used to transform from chronic procrastinators into unstoppable action takers. The only question remaining is, will you take action right now, or will you let this moment become another someday? Your next action will give you the answer. What will you choose? Thank you for listening and for investing in yourself. I believe in you. Your potential is endless. Now go out there and create the life you deserve.